The blueprint slipped from Malcolm's hands. Through the glass wall of the executive floor, he watched his CEO, Naomi Carter, the woman who commanded boardrooms with surgical precision, who never flinched during million-dollar presentations, crumble. Her shoulders shook. Mascara streaked down her face. Her phone lay shattered on the marble floor. For 3 years, Malcolm had existed invisible in her world. The widowed draftsman, the single father who worked late shifts and never made waves. But tonight, at 9:47 p.m. on an empty Friday, she looked up. Their eyes met through the glass. She opened the door. "Help me," she whispered. What happened next would shatter every boundary between them. Professional, personal, emotional. This is the story of two broken people who built something real from a beautiful lie. If you're watching from your city right now, drop it in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And hit that like button. You're going to want to see how this unfolds. The fluorescent lights of Carter and Associates hummed their familiar late-night song. Malcolm Reed sat hunched over his drafting table on the 4th floor, the architect's pencil moving with practiced precision across vellum paper. Around him, the open-plan office stretched empty and dark, desks abandoned hours ago when normal people went home to normal lives. Malcolm hadn't had a normal life in 3 years, not since the accident. He adjusted his reading glasses and studied the residential complex taking shape beneath his hands. The lead architect, some hotshot from the executive floor he'd never met, had left notes in the margins, more light in the common areas. These families need space to breathe. The handwriting was elegant, decisive. Malcolm appreciated that. Whoever they were, they understood that architecture wasn't just about buildings. It was about the lives that would unfold inside them. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen, his neighbor and lifesaver. "Mia's asleep. Take your time." "We made cookies." Malcolm smiled. His 8-year-old daughter had Mrs. Chen wrapped around her little finger. The elderly woman had become their family when Malcolm's world had shattered. When Sarah's car had hydroplaned on a rain-slicked highway, and he'd become a widower at 29. A single father trying to hold together a life that felt like scattered puzzle pieces. He stretched, his back protesting the hours bent over the table. Nearly 10 o'clock. He should head home. But the apartment always felt too quiet after Mia went to bed, filled with Sarah's absence like negative space in a design, present through what wasn't there. That's when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong in the sterile silence of the after-hours office. A sob. Raw and uncontrolled. Malcolm froze, pencil hovering. The executive floor was directly above him, separated by a mezzanine that created a double-height space in the center of the building. Glass walls everywhere. The firm's signature aesthetic. Transparency and design, the marketing materials proclaimed. He looked up through the glass ceiling panels. The executive offices glowed like an aquarium suspended in darkness. And there, in the corner office, the biggest one, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, was Naomi Carter. Malcolm had seen her before, of course. Everyone had. She was impossible to miss. At 30 years old, she was the youngest CEO in the firm's 40-year history, having taken over when her father suffered a stroke 2 years ago. The architecture world had watched with skepticism. A young woman inheriting her daddy's company, they'd sneered. She'd proven every single one of them wrong. Naomi Carter was brilliant, ruthless when she needed to be, visionary always. She'd landed 3 major civic contracts in 18 months, expanded the firm from 30 to 75 employees, and maintained a client satisfaction rate that bordered on miraculous. She wore power suits like armor, kept her dark hair in a sleek bun that never showed a strand out of place, and moved through the office with the focused intensity of someone who had no time for anything but excellence. Malcolm had been in exactly one meeting with her. A project review 6 months ago where she'd spent 45 minutes dissecting every element of a proposed community center, asking questions that cut straight to structural and social implications. She'd never looked at him directly. Why would she? He was a mid-level draftsman, competent but unremarkable, one of dozens. But right now, Naomi Carter was anything but composed. She stood in the center of her office, one hand pressed against the glass wall as if it was the only thing holding her upright. Her other hand covered her mouth, muffling sobs that shook her entire body. Her suit jacket lay crumpled on the floor. Her hair had come loose from its usual severe bun, falling around her face in dark waves. Malcolm should look away. This was private, intimate in its devastation. But he couldn't move. On the floor near her feet, he could see the glittering fragments of what had been her phone. She'd thrown it, he realized, hard enough to shatter it against the wall. She sank into her desk chair, elbows on the glass desk, face in her hands. Her shoulders heaved. Malcolm's chest tightened. He recognized that kind of crying, the kind that came from somewhere deep and desperate, where you'd held everything together for so long that when it finally broke, it broke completely. He'd cried like that the night of Sarah's funeral, after everyone had left and Mia had finally fallen asleep, and he'd stood in their bedroom staring at her clothes still hanging in the closet. He should go home. This wasn't his business. Malcolm gathered his papers, slipped them into his portfolio, and switched off his desk lamp. He crossed to the stairwell. The elevators were too loud this late, and he didn't want to disturb the silence. But when he reached the ground floor, he found himself stopping, his hand on the exit door. The parking lot beyond, dark and waiting. None of your business, he told himself. Go home. He thought of Mia, safe and warm in Mrs. Chen's apartment. He thought of his empty apartment next door. He thought of Naomi Carter, alone in her glass tower, crying like her heart was breaking. Damn it, he muttered. He took the stairs back up, not to the 4th floor, but to the 5th, the executive level. The security scanner blinked red when he pressed his badge. 4th floor access only, but the stairwell door itself wasn't locked. Fire code. Malcolm pushed through into a hallway that looked nothing like the practical workspace below. Here, everything was premium. Hardwood floors, original art on the walls, soft lighting that cost more than his monthly rent. Naomi's office was at the end. The door stood slightly ajar. Malcolm approached, his footsteps silent on the expensive flooring. Through the gap, he could see her still sitting at her desk, now perfectly still. She'd wiped her face, but her eyes were red-rimmed, mascara smudged. She stared at nothing, her expression hollow. He knocked softly. She jerked upright, instantly transforming. Her spine straightened, her face smoothed into a professional mask. But she couldn't hide the evidence. The destroyed phone, the wrinkled blouse, the hair falling from its pins. We're closed, she said, her voice only slightly rough. Security will... She stopped when she actually looked at him. He watched recognition fail to register. She had no idea who he was. I'm Malcolm Reed, he said quietly. I work on the 4th floor, drafting department. I saw... He gestured vaguely upward toward the glass ceiling. Are you okay? It was possibly the stupidest question he'd ever asked. She was clearly not okay. Naomi Carter stared at him for a long moment. He could see her calculating, weighing responses, deciding how to handle this intrusion, the CEO brain working even through whatever crisis had reduced her to tears. Then something in her face just gave up. No, she said simply. I'm not okay. The honesty of it hit Malcolm like a physical thing. In his experience, powerful people never admitted vulnerability. They deflected, dismissed, rebuilt their walls. She stood, moving to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. 40 stories down, traffic moved like blood cells through arteries of light. She wrapped her arms around herself. You should go, she said, but there was no force behind it. I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine, just a long week. Malcolm should have listened, should have respected the dismissal and left her to whatever private disaster this was. Instead, he found himself walking into her office. I lost my wife 3 years ago, he heard himself say. Car accident. I had a 2-month-old daughter at home, and I remember thinking that if one more person asked if I was okay, I would break something. Naomi turned to look at him, truly look at him, for the first time. I'm sorry, she said. I can't imagine. Yeah. Malcolm stopped a respectful distance away, hands in his pockets. Anyway, I'm not going to ask if you're okay, but I am going to ask if there's anything I can do, even if it's just standing here so you're not alone. Sometimes that helps. She studied him with dark eyes that were too sharp, even red-rimmed from crying. Why would you do that? You don't know me. No, he agreed, but I know what it's like to fall apart when you can't afford to, and I know it's easier with a witness, someone who won't judge, someone who won't tell. Naomi's laugh was bitter. You're assuming I can trust you. You can't, Malcolm said honestly. We just met. For all you know, I could walk out of here and tell everyone that the great Naomi Carter had a breakdown in her office. He met her eyes steadily. But I won't. Because 3 years ago, Mrs. Chen from 4B held me while I cried in the laundry room at 2 in the morning. She didn't tell anyone. Some kindnesses are meant to be private. For a long moment, Naomi said nothing. Then she sank into one of the leather chairs arranged around a small meeting table, suddenly looking exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. My cousin's getting married, she said abruptly. In 2 weeks. Hampton Estate wedding, 300 guests. The whole family will be there. Malcolm waited. There was clearly more. I told them I was seeing someone, Naomi continued, her voice flat. 6 months ago, at Christmas, my mother was on her usual crusade about my biological clock, and my sister was showing off her new boyfriend, and everyone was looking at me like I was this tragic workaholic who would die alone surrounded by blueprints. She laughed without humor. So I lied. I said I was dating someone serious. Ah, Malcolm said, understanding dawning. I thought I'd have time to figure it out, meet someone, make it real. But I didn't. I was too busy saving the firm from the commercial real estate collapse, too busy raising my son alone, too busy being the CEO everyone expects me to be. Her hands clenched in her lap. And now the wedding is in 2 weeks, and my mother just called to confirm that I'm bringing my serious boyfriend and to ask what dietary restrictions he has. And the phone? Malcolm gestured to the shattered device. The wall seemed like a good listener at the time. Naomi rubbed her temples. I can't show up alone. My mother will crucify me. My sister will smirk. My ex-fiancé will be there with his new girlfriend, probably thrilled to see I'm exactly where he predicted I'd be. Alone. Married to my work. Why not just tell them the truth? Malcolm asked. Say it didn't work out? Naomi looked at him like he'd suggested she show up naked. You don't know my family. They don't accept failure. My father built this firm from nothing. My mother is on the board of every major charity in the city. My sister is a neurosurgeon married to a judge. We don't fail at things. We don't lie and get caught. We maintain standards. The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Malcolm pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. So what are you going to do? I don't know. Naomi's voice was barely above a whisper. Cancel. Food poisoning. Family emergency. Something. And then what? This doesn't go away. There'll be another event, another holiday, another opportunity for them to look at you like you're broken. Her eyes flashed. I'm not broken. I didn't say you were, Malcolm said calmly. But they make you feel like you are, don't they? The fight went out of her. Every single time. Silence settled between them. Outside, the city glittered with Friday night life. People in restaurants, in bars, in relationships that might be real or might be just as constructed as whatever Naomi had described to her family. I could go with you, Malcolm said. The words surprised him as much as they clearly surprised Naomi. She stared at him. What? Malcolm's brain scrambled to catch up with his mouth. To the wedding. I could be your boyfriend, your date, whatever you told them. You're joking. I'm really not. And weirdly, now that he'd said it, the idea didn't seem crazy. Insane, yes. Professionally questionable, definitely. But not crazy. Think about it. You need a date. Someone presentable who can handle your family's scrutiny. Someone with nothing to gain from this, so there's no complicated aftermath. I fit the bill. You're an employee, Naomi said. This is wildly inappropriate. It's a favor, Malcolm corrected. One person helping another. What happens outside this office isn't the company's business, as long as it doesn't affect our work. And since I'm a draftsman and you're the CEO, we don't exactly interact professionally anyway. Naomi stood, pacing to the windows and back. You don't understand what you'd be signing up for. My family is, they're a lot. They'll ask invasive questions. They'll judge everything about you, your clothes, your job, your background. They'll try to find reasons you're not good enough. So basically, like meeting any family? Malcolm said. Naomi, Ms. Carter. I spent 2 years listening to Sarah's parents explain all the ways I wasn't living up to their daughter's potential. I can handle judgment. She stopped pacing, studying him with an intensity that made him feel like a building she was assessing for structural integrity. Why would you do this? She asked. What's in it for you? Malcolm considered the question. The real answer was complicated, because he recognized the desperation in her tears, because he understood the weight of maintaining appearances while drowning internally, because for 3 years he'd been half alive, going through motions, and maybe doing something completely unexpected would remind him what it felt like to actually live. But he went with the simpler truth. Because you asked for help, he said, and I can give it. Naomi sat back down slowly, her movements careful, controlled. The CEO was reassembling herself, he could see, evaluating options, calculating risks. This is insane, she said. Completely, Malcolm agreed. We barely know each other. We can fix that. We have 2 weeks. If anyone at work found out, they won't. Not unless you want them to. Naomi drummed her fingers on the table, a nervous gesture that seemed at odds with her usual precision. What about your daughter? You said you have a daughter. Mia, she's 8, and she'll be with Mrs. Chen that weekend. It's already arranged. I was supposed to attend a conference. He smiled slightly. I'll just tell her it got moved to a different location. You'd lie to your daughter for me? I'd tell her I'm helping a friend, which isn't a lie. We're not friends, Naomi pointed out. Not yet, Malcolm said. But we could be. If we're going to pull this off, we'll need to be convincing. That requires actually knowing each other. Naomi was quiet for a long time. Malcolm could practically hear the calculations happening behind her eyes. The risk assessment, the cost-benefit analysis. Finally, she looked up. If we do this, and I'm not saying we are, but if we do, there would need to be rules, boundaries, clear expectations. Agreed. This is strictly professional, a transaction. You help me get through this wedding, I don't know, what do you want? Promotion, better projects? Malcolm shook his head. I don't want anything, except maybe to help someone who needs it. She frowned. That's not how the world works. Everyone wants something. Then maybe I want to believe that sometimes people can just be kind, Malcolm said, without an angle. Naomi stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. Maybe to her he was. He was beginning to understand that her world, a world of corporate strategy and family expectations and constant performance, didn't have much room for uncomplicated kindness. 2 weeks, she said finally. We have 2 weeks to make this believable. So that's a yes. She closed her eyes, took a breath, opened them again with the expression of someone committing to a high-risk strategy. That's a yes. Malcolm felt something loosen in his chest. Relief, maybe, or possibly terror at what he'd just agreed to. Okay, he said. Then we should probably start with the basics. What exactly did you tell your family about this mysterious boyfriend? Naomi grimaced. Not much, just that I'd been seeing someone for about 6 months, someone outside the architecture world, someone grounded. Grounded? My mother's word. She was thrilled I'd found someone who wasn't another ambitious architect, someone who might actually prioritize family over projects. The irony in her voice was thick. Apparently, I need someone to balance me out. Well, Malcolm said, widowed single father with a drafting career definitely qualifies as grounded. This is going to be a disaster, Naomi muttered. Probably, Malcolm agreed, but at least it'll be an interesting disaster. Despite everything, Naomi laughed. It was a real laugh, startled and genuine, and it transformed her face completely. For a moment, she didn't look like a CEO or a Carter family disappointment. She looked like a 30-year-old woman who had been carrying too much for too long. I must be out of my mind, she said. That makes 2 of us. Malcolm stood, extending his hand. So, partners in crime? Naomi looked at his hand for a moment before taking it. Her grip was firm, professional. A handshake that meant business. Partners? she agreed. But Malcolm? If this blows up in our faces, I'm blaming you. Fair enough, he said. When do we start? She glanced at the destroyed phone on the floor, then at the laptop on her desk. Tomorrow. I'll text you. Actually, I'll email you. Work email. With a time to meet. We need to get our story straight before we're in front of my family. Your family doesn't know what I do? I kept it vague, professional. They assumed lawyer or doctor or something respectably boring. She paused. They're going to be disappointed. Story of my life, Malcolm said lightly. He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him at the door. Malcolm? He looked back. She was standing now, silhouetted against the city lights, looking small despite her power suit and corner office. Thank you, she said quietly, for not leaving when you should have. Any time, he said, and meant it. The next morning, Malcolm woke to Mia jumping on his bed, her dark curls flying everywhere. Daddy, Mrs. Chen made pancakes and she says I can have chocolate chips if you say yes. Malcolm groaned, checking his phone. 7:30 on a Saturday. This child had no concept of sleeping in. Chocolate chips for breakfast? He caught her mid-bounce, pulling her into a hug. What would Mommy say? Mia considered this seriously. At 8, her memories of Sarah were already fading into photographs and stories. It broke Malcolm's heart in small ways every day. Mommy liked chocolate, Mia decided, so she'd probably say yes. Smart reasoning. Malcolm tickled her until she squealed. Okay, but only because Mrs. Chen already made them. Tell her I'll be over in 10 minutes. Mia raced off, and Malcolm lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. In the sober light of morning, last night felt surreal. Had he really agreed to fake date his CEO? To attend a society wedding and pretend to be in a relationship with a woman he'd spoken to exactly once before? His phone buzzed. A new email. From n.carter@carterassociates.com. Subject. Meeting. Strategic planning. Malcolm, tomorrow, 2 p.m. Riverside Coffee on Main. We need to coordinate details. Bring your calendar. NC professional, concise. No mention of what details they'd be coordinating. Anyone glancing at her sent folder would see a simple business meeting. Malcolm replied with one word. Confirmed. Then he hauled himself out of bed to deal with chocolate chip pancakes and a Saturday that suddenly felt a lot more complicated than usual. Riverside Coffee was exactly the kind of place Malcolm would have expected Naomi to choose. Upscale but not pretentious. Quiet. The kind of place where professionals met for business without raising eyebrows. He arrived 10 minutes early, ordering a black coffee and claiming a corner table with good sight lines. Old habit from his military days. Always know your exits. Always see who's coming. Naomi arrived exactly at 2 o'clock. She wore jeans, expensive ones, and a cream sweater that probably cost more than Malcolm's car payment. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves around her face. Without the armor of her power suits, she looked younger, more approachable, and absolutely terrified. She ordered something complicated with multiple modifiers, then slid into the seat across from him. I almost didn't come, she said without preamble. But you did. Because I've been up since 4 a.m. trying to think of alternatives, and I don't have any. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. My mother called this morning. She wants to have dinner, meet my boyfriend, make sure he's appropriate before she allows him at the wedding. Allows? You'll understand when you meet her. Naomi took a sip, grimaced at the temperature, and set the cup down. So, we need to build a relationship history. Fast. Malcolm pulled out his phone, opening a new note. Okay, how did we meet? Not at work, Naomi said immediately. That's too messy, too many ways for someone to verify and find holes. Book club? Malcolm suggested. Do you read? Voraciously, do you? Naomi paused. Used to, before I became CEO. Now I mostly read contracts and project proposals. That's depressing, Malcolm said. That's life. But she smiled slightly. Okay, book club works. Literary fiction? Mystery? How about architecture and design? Makes sense for both our backgrounds, but it's specific enough to be believable. Good. Well, Naomi typed something on her own phone. Monthly meetings. We met 6 months ago, September. The book was The Architecture of Happiness, Malcolm supplied. Alain de Botton. Very pretentious. Very book club. Naomi's smile widened. You started talking about how the author romanticizes domestic space without addressing economic accessibility. And you argued that beauty has inherent value regardless of cost. We disagreed completely, Naomi said, warming to the story. But afterwards you offered to buy me coffee to continue the argument, which turned into dinner, which turned into regular dates. She met his eyes. We kept it quiet because you were still processing your wife's death, and I was dealing with work pressure. It felt private, sacred. Malcolm felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. The story was fake, but the emotions it touched were real. He had been processing Sarah's death. Still was, if he was honest. Works for me, he said. What else do they need to know? They spent the next hour building their fictional relationship. Favorite dates? The art museum, a jazz club, quiet dinners at a Thai place near Malcolm's apartment. Inside jokes, his terrible sense of direction, her addiction to true crime podcasts. The moment they knew it was serious, a rainy Sunday morning when he'd brought coffee to her place and stayed to help her reorganize her bookshelf. It was disturbingly easy to construct. Maybe because both of them understood loneliness well enough to imagine what filling it might look like. What about physical affection? Naomi asked, and Malcolm noticed the slight tension in her shoulders. What about it? Couples touch, hold hands, kiss. My family will expect to see that. She looked distinctly uncomfortable. We should probably practice, so it doesn't look awkward. Malcolm considered this. She was right, but the idea of touching Naomi Carter, his CEO, still basically a stranger, felt complicated in ways he couldn't quite name. Let's start small, he said. Here, give me your hand. Naomi extended her hand across the table. Malcolm took it, his larger hand enveloping her smaller one. Her skin was soft, her fingers cold from the iced coffee. See? He said. Just holding hands, nothing weird. But it was weird, because the moment their hands connected, something shifted, an awareness. The coffee shop didn't disappear exactly, but it receded. The ambient noise became background static. Naomi felt it too. He could see it in the way her breath caught, the way her eyes widened slightly. She pulled her hand back. We should practice the story more, she said, her voice slightly unsteady. My mother will interrogate you. She'll want to know about your family, your background, your plans for the future. Malcolm let her redirect. Okay. My family, parents retired to Arizona. One younger sister, married, 2 kids, lives in Portland. We're close, but not overly so. I see them once or twice a year. Education? State university, architecture degree. Did 2 years in the Army Reserves before that. Naomi nodded, typing notes. My family will like the military service. Very respectable. What about you? Malcolm asked. What do I need to know about the Carter family? Naomi's expression shuddered slightly. Mother, Patricia Carter, former museum director, now professional philanthropist and social coordinator. She will judge everything about you in the first 30 seconds and spend the rest of the time confirming her initial assessment. Harsh. Accurate, Naomi corrected. Father, Richard Carter, founded the firm 40 years ago, suffered a major stroke 2 years ago. He's better now, but mostly retired. He'll be polite but distant. He doesn't invest energy in people unless they're professionally useful. Your sister? Victoria, neurosurgeon, married to Judge Harrison Blake. They have 1 daughter, perfect in every way, and Victoria never lets anyone forget it. Naomi's voice carried an edge. We're not close. Malcolm heard the years of comparison in those words, the weight of being measured against a sibling and found wanting. The ex-fiancé? He asked carefully. Naomi went very still. Kieran Phillips. We were engaged for 6 months 4 years ago. He's a corporate attorney, very charming, very ambitious. He ended it when I took over the firm because he didn't want to be Mr. Naomi Carter. Last I heard, he's with a consultant who's happy to be in his shadow. He'll be at the wedding? Probably. He and my cousin were friends in college. She met Malcolm's eyes. He'll try to get under your skin. He's very good at finding weaknesses. Then it's a good thing I don't have any, Malcolm said lightly. Naomi's laugh was soft but genuine. Everyone has weaknesses, Malcolm. Yeah, he agreed. But he doesn't know mine. They talked until the coffee shop started filling with the late afternoon crowd. By the time they left, Malcolm's head was swimming with information. The Carter family tree, Naomi's childhood, boarding schools and summer internships and constant pressure to excel. Her son Elijah, who was 6 and loved dinosaurs and stayed with his grandmother during Naomi's long work weeks. Wait, Malcolm said as they stood on the sidewalk outside. Your mother babysits the terrifying Patricia Carter? She adores Elijah, Naomi said. He's the perfect grandchild, smart, well-behaved, everything I apparently wasn't. But her voice softened when she talked about her son. He's the best thing I ever did, even if I'm probably screwing him up with how much I work. You're not screwing him up, Malcolm said. Kids are resilient, and they mostly need to know they're loved. Everything else is details. Naomi looked at him curiously. Is that what you tell yourself about Mia? Every single day. They stood there for a moment, 2 single parents carrying their respective guilts and fears. The afternoon sun caught in Naomi's hair, turning it amber at the edges. Dinner with my mother is Tuesday, Naomi said. 7 o'clock. Wear a suit. I own exactly 1 suit, Malcolm said. My interview suit from 3 years ago. That'll work. She hesitated, then added, Malcolm, thank you for doing this. I know it's insane. Insane is relative, he said. 2 weeks ago, my biggest concern was getting Mia to eat vegetables. This is definitely more interesting. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. And Malcolm realized with a start that Naomi Carter had a beautiful smile, the kind that made you want to earn it again. I'll email you the restaurant details, she said. Then she was gone, walking to her car, a sleek sedan that probably cost more than Malcolm made in a year. He watched her drive away, wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. Tuesday evening arrived too fast. Malcolm stood in front of his bathroom mirror, attempting to knot his tie for the 3rd time. Mia sat on the closed toilet lid, offering commentary. You look fancy, Daddy. I look uncomfortable, Malcolm corrected. The suit fit, barely, but it had been a while since he'd worn anything more formal than jeans and a button-down. Why are you getting fancy? Dinner meeting, work thing. On a Tuesday night? Mia's 8-year-old bullshit detector was finely tuned. Yep. That's weird. Yep. She studied him with Sarah's eyes, that same sharp intelligence that never missed details. Is it a date? Malcolm's hand stilled on the tie. What makes you ask that? Because you look nervous. And you only look nervous about 2 things, me getting hurt and meeting new people. Sometimes having a smart kid was a curse. It's not a date, he said. Which was technically true. It was a performance. A rehearsal for the real performance. It's just dinner with some people from work. Okay. Mia didn't sound convinced, but she let it go. Can I stay up late and watch my show? Nice try. Mrs. Chen has her instructions. Mrs. Chen always says yes. Mrs. Chen is a pushover, and you're a terror. Match made in heaven. Mia giggled, and Malcolm pulled her into a hug, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. His anchor. His reason for getting up every morning and putting one foot in front of the other. I love you, Bug, he said. Love you too, Daddy. She pulled back, studying his face with that too-old seriousness. Are you okay? Yeah, he said. I'm good, just nervous about the meeting. You'll do great, she said with complete confidence. You always do. If only that were true. The restaurant was called Aubergine, and Malcolm knew immediately he was out of his depth. Valet parking. A host in a suit nicer than Malcolm's. Menus without prices. Naomi had texted him the details with one additional note. Private dining room. 3rd floor. He found her waiting in an elegant space that was more library than restaurant. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs. A fireplace that probably cost more than Malcolm's car. And sitting across from Naomi, perfectly composed in pearls and a designer dress, was Patricia Carter. She turned when Malcolm entered, and he understood immediately why Naomi had been terrified. Patricia Carter was beautiful, in the way of women who'd been beautiful their entire lives and knew exactly how to weaponize it. Mid-60s, silver hair and a perfect chignon, eyes that could dissect a balance sheet or a soul with equal precision. She stood, extending a hand. "You must be Malcolm. I'm Patricia." Her handshake was firm, brief, and assessing. Malcolm felt measured and catalogued in that single moment of contact. "Mrs. Carter, thank you for inviting me." "Please." "Patricia." She gestured to the seat beside Naomi. "Sit. Tell me about yourself." What followed was possibly the most intense hour of Malcolm's life. Patricia Carter asked questions like a prosecutor, polite, interested, and designed to extract maximum information with minimum effort. His education, his career trajectory, his family, his marriage to Sarah and her death, his relationship with Mia, his financial stability, his health insurance, his retirement planning. If Naomi hadn't prepped him, he would have been demolished. As it was, he held his own. He talked about his work with genuine passion, how architecture was about creating spaces where people could build lives, not just structures. He talked about Mia with the love of a devoted father. He talked about Sarah with respect and honesty, not hiding the grief but not drowning in it either. And through it all, Naomi sat beside him, her hand occasionally resting on his arm in small gestures of support that looked natural but felt electric. "And what are your intentions with my daughter?" Patricia asked, her voice pleasant, but her eyes sharp. Malcolm felt Naomi tense beside him. "My intentions," he said carefully, "are to be whatever Naomi needs. A partner, a support, someone who sees how remarkable she is and doesn't need her to be anything other than herself." It was the truth, he realized as he said it, not about their fake relationship, but about what anyone deserving of Naomi should offer. Patricia studied him for a long moment, then she turned to Naomi. "He's significantly different from Kieran." "That's the point, Mother," Naomi said quietly. "Kieran had ambition, drive. He was going places." "Kieran was an asshole," Naomi said, her voice level but her eyes flashing. "He was more interested in what I could do for his career than who I was as a person. He would have given you stability." "I give myself stability." Naomi's hand found Malcolm's under the table, squeezing hard. "Malcolm gives me something more important. He gives me peace." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Patricia smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Well," she said, "I suppose that's what matters. Your happiness." She said happiness like it was a consolation prize. Dinner arrived, small, artfully arranged plates that probably had names Malcolm couldn't pronounce. The conversation shifted to safer topics: the wedding logistics, family gossip, Naomi's work at the firm. Malcolm played his role: attentive boyfriend, supportive partner. He asked Patricia about her charity work and listened with genuine interest as she described a literacy program she'd founded. He told a story about Mia's school play that made Patricia laugh, an actual, real laugh. By the time dessert arrived, some of the tension had eased. But as they were leaving, Patricia pulled Malcolm aside while Naomi was in the restroom. "A word of advice," Patricia said, her voice low. "My daughter is exceptional, brilliant, but she's also wounded in ways she doesn't let people see. Her father's expectations, her career pressures, the failure of her engagement." She met Malcolm's eyes. "If you can't handle that weight, walk away now, before she lets herself depend on you." Malcolm held her gaze. "I can handle it." "Can you? You're a single father with a modest career. Naomi makes more in a month than you probably make in a year. That dynamic breaks most men." "I'm not most men," Malcolm said quietly, "and I'm not intimidated by her success. I'm proud of it." Patricia studied him, and for the first time he saw something other than calculation in her eyes. Uncertainty, maybe, or hope. "We'll see," she said. Naomi emerged from the restroom, and they said their goodbyes. Patricia kissed her daughter's cheek, a gesture that looked affectionate but felt performative. "He's acceptable," she told Naomi. "Bring him to the wedding." High praise, apparently, given Naomi's visible relief. They didn't speak until they were outside, the night air cool after the restaurant's warmth. That was brutal, Malcolm said. That was her being nice, Naomi replied. She actually liked you. I could tell. How? She only asked about your finances once. With Kieran, she requested his tax returns. Malcolm laughed, surprised. Your family is terrifying. Welcome to the Carters. Naomi turned to face him, and in the soft light from the street lamps, she looked tired, younger. You were amazing in there. The way you talked about your daughter, about Sarah, about… She paused. About what I need. That was perfect. I meant it, Malcolm said. She studied his face. I know, that's what made it perfect. They stood there on the sidewalk, the city moving around them. A couple passed, hand in hand, laughing about something private. A taxi honked. Somewhere, music drifted from an open window. One dinner down, Naomi said. One wedding to go. We can do this, Malcolm said with more confidence than he felt. Yeah. She smiled. We can. But as Malcolm drove home that night, he couldn't shake Patricia Carter's words. If you can't handle that weight, walk away now. The problem was, he was beginning to suspect the weight wasn't the scary part. The scary part was how much he didn't want to walk away. The wedding was 9 days away, and Malcolm was beginning to understand what Hampton Estate wedding actually meant. It meant a guest list that read like a Fortune 500 directory. It meant dress codes with subcategories. It meant Naomi's assistant emailing him a 20-page briefing document on family members he needed to recognize, complete with photographs and relationship dynamics that read like a Cold War intelligence report. It also meant spending significantly more time with Naomi Carter than he'd anticipated. They met for coffee 3 times that week, lunch twice. One dinner where they practiced their origin story until Malcolm could recite it in his sleep. Each meeting felt less like preparation and more like actual dates, which was precisely the problem. Because somewhere between discussing Naomi's complicated relationship with her sister and Malcolm explaining why Mia refused to eat anything green, the performance had started feeling uncomfortably real. On Thursday evening, Naomi showed up at his apartment unannounced. Malcolm answered the door in sweatpants and an old army t-shirt, his reading glasses perched on his nose. Mia was at a sleepover, and he'd been planning a quiet night of sketches and bourbon. We have a problem, Naomi said, walking past him into the small living room without waiting for an invitation. She was still in work clothes, tailored pants and a silk blouse that probably cost more than his couch. Her hair was coming loose from its bun, and she had the frazzled energy of someone who'd been fighting fires all day. Hello to you too, Malcolm said, closing the door. Coffee? Wine? Something stronger? Wine, please. She sank onto his couch, kicking off her heels with a groan of relief. My sister called. She wants to have dinner, tomorrow night, with you and me and her husband. Malcolm retrieved 2 wine glasses from the kitchen, mismatched ones he'd gotten at a thrift store, and poured generous amounts of red wine he'd been saving for no particular occasion. That doesn't sound like a problem, he said, handing her a glass. More practice, right? You don't know Victoria. Naomi took a long drink. She's not like my mother. Patricia tests to see if you're acceptable. Victoria tests to destroy. She'll pick at every inconsistency, every hesitation. She'll try to prove we're lying. Why would she do that? Because she's my older sister, and I'm the fuck-up who took over the family business instead of becoming a doctor or a lawyer or something appropriately prestigious. The bitterness in Naomi's voice was sharp. Because she's perfect, and I'm not, and she needs everyone to remember that. Malcolm sat down beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. His apartment was small, 1 bedroom for Mia, the couch that folded out for him, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. After the restaurants and offices where they'd been meeting, it must have looked impossibly modest. But Naomi didn't seem to notice. She looked around with genuine curiosity, her eyes landing on the framed photos on the bookshelf. Mia at various ages. 1 wedding photo of Malcolm and Sarah, young and hopeful. A sketch Malcolm had done of the Golden Gate Bridge during his honeymoon. You draw, she said, nodding toward the drafting table in the corner, covered in his personal projects. When I have time, which isn't often. Malcolm followed her gaze. Mostly I work on other people's visions all day. This is just for me. Naomi stood, walking to the table. She studied the current project, a redesign of a community park, something Malcolm had been tinkering with for months. His notes covered the margins, accessibility features, natural shade structures, play areas that accommodated different abilities. "This is beautiful," she said quietly. "Why isn't this in your portfolio?" "Because it's a fantasy. The city won't fund something like this. Too expensive, too ambitious." He shrugged. "So it stays here, a dream on paper." Naomi traced one finger along the elevation drawing. "You're better than the fourth floor, you know. These ideas, they're lead architect quality. Senior designer at minimum." "Thanks." Malcolm felt heat rise in his face. "But I'm fine where I am. The pay is steady. The hours let me be there for Mia. That's what matters." She turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. "Don't you want more?" "More what? More money to work longer hours? More projects that keep me away from my daughter? More status that won't mean anything when she's grown and I've missed her childhood?" He met her eyes. "I had ambition once. Then Sarah died and I realized ambition doesn't hold you when you're crying at 3 a.m. It doesn't care if you make it to school plays, so no. I don't want more. I want enough." Naomi was quiet for a long moment. Then she returned to the couch, curling up in the corner with her wine glass cradled in both hands. "I envy that," she said. "The certainty. Knowing what's enough." "You don't know what's enough for you?" "I know what everyone expects. What the firm needs. What Elijah deserves. What my family demands." She stared into her wine. "But what I want? What would be enough for just me? I have no idea." Malcolm recognized the loneliness in those words, the exhaustion of living for everyone else's definitions of success. "Tell me about Elijah," he said. "I've seen the photo on your desk, but you never really talk about him." Naomi's face softened immediately. "He's 6, smart as hell, obsessed with dinosaurs, specifically the herbivores, because he thinks carnivores get too much attention. He's gentle and thoughtful and absolutely nothing like me." "I doubt that." "No, it's true. He got all his father's best qualities: kindness, patience, the ability to exist without controlling everything around him." She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "His father and I weren't together long. A brief relationship that ended badly. But he gave me Elijah, so I can't regret it entirely." "Does he see his father?" "No. Daniel made it clear he wasn't interested in being a parent. Signed away all rights, pays nothing, wants nothing, which is fine. Better an absent father than one who resents his existence." She took another sip of wine. "Elijah asks sometimes. I tell him the truth, that his dad wasn't ready to be a parent, but that doesn't mean he's not loved. That I love him enough for 2. "You're a good mom," Malcolm said. Naomi laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I work 60 hours a week. My mother has him more than I do. I miss bedtimes and school events, and sometimes I go 3 days only seeing him asleep. I'm a terrible mom." "You're a working mom doing her best in an impossible situation," Malcolm corrected. "There's a difference." She looked at him, something vulnerable in her expression. "How do you do it? Balance everything? You're always there for Mia. You make it look easy." "It's not easy, and I'm not always there." Malcolm set down his wine glass. "I missed her first steps because I was deployed. I forgot her 5th birthday because I was drowning in grief over Sarah. Last month I sent her to school with mismatched shoes because I was so tired I couldn't see straight. I'm not winning any Parent of the Year awards. But you're present. When you're with her, you're really with her. So are you, I bet, when you're with Elijah. When I'm with him, I'm thinking about work, about emails I need to send, about projects that are falling behind." Naomi's voice cracked slightly. "He deserves better." Malcolm shifted closer, not touching, but near enough that she could feel his presence. "He deserves a mother who's honest about her struggles, who shows him that being human means being imperfect, who loves him fiercely even when she's exhausted. And from everything you've told me, that's exactly what he has." Naomi turned to him, and he saw tears gathering in her eyes. Not the breakdown he'd witnessed in her office, but something quieter, more intimate. "Why are you so kind to me?" she whispered. "We barely know each other. This whole thing is fake. But you keep saying exactly what I need to hear. Maybe because it's not fake, Malcolm said. The relationship is sure. But this? Two parents trying to figure out how to be enough? That's real. The space between them felt charged. Dangerous. Naomi's eyes dropped to his mouth, then back up. Malcolm's heart kicked against his ribs. He should move away, establish distance. Remember that this was a transaction, a performance, nothing more. Instead, he reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Naomi inhaled sharply. Malcolm! His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. Mrs. Chen's name flashed on the screen. Malcolm grabbed it, grateful and disappointed in equal measure. Hello? Malcolm, dear, I'm so sorry to bother you. Mrs. Chen's voice carried her characteristic worry. But Mia just called. She's having a hard time at the sleepover. Asked if you could pick her up. Of course. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He was already standing, looking for his keys. Is she okay? She sounds upset, but won't say why. You know how she gets. He did know. Mia was tough as nails until she wasn't, and when she crashed hard. Malcolm hung up and turned to Naomi. I have to go. Mia needs me. Of course. Naomi was already gathering her shoes, the vulnerable moment sealed away behind her professional mask. Is she all right? I don't know, but I need to find out. He grabbed his jacket, then paused. Tomorrow night, dinner with your sister. What time? 7. Morton's Steakhouse downtown. Naomi stood, smoothing her clothes. But Malcolm, if you need to cancel, I'll be there, he said firmly. Text me if anything changes. She nodded, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Two people standing in a cramped apartment pretending they hadn't almost crossed a line. Thank you, Naomi said quietly, for tonight, for listening. Anytime, Malcolm said. Then he was out the door, his mind already shifting to Mia and whatever had made his strong, stubborn daughter ask to come home. The performance with Naomi would have to wait. Real life was calling. Mia was sitting on the front steps of her friend's house, her overnight bag clutched to her chest, her face blotchy from crying. Malcolm's heart clenched. He thanked the confused parents who assured him everything had been fine until Mia suddenly asked to leave, and guided his daughter to the car. She was silent the whole drive home, staring out the window with that 1,000-yard stare kids get when they're processing something too big for words. Inside their apartment, Malcolm made hot chocolate with excessive marshmallows and waited. Mia curled up on the couch in her pajamas, cradling the mug. Want to tell me what happened? He asked gently. Mia was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then, in a small voice, they were talking about their moms, about things they do together, shopping and baking and sleepovers and stuff. Malcolm felt the familiar ache of grief. Even 3 years later, Sarah's absence was a presence. And it made you miss Mommy, he said. Mia nodded, tears spilling over. I can't remember her voice anymore, Daddy. I try and try, but I can't hear it, and I got scared that I'm forgetting her. Malcolm set down his own mug and pulled Mia into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, her small body shaking with sobs. You're not forgetting her, he said into her hair. The voice might fade, but everything else stays. The way she laughed, how she always sang off key, the way she made you feel safe. That's still there, Bug. It's in you. It's part of who you are. But I want to remember everything, Mia said desperately. What if I forget more? What if someday I don't remember her at all? Malcolm's throat tightened. This was the conversation he'd been dreading, the one where he had to help his daughter navigate a grief that had no good answers. Want to know a secret? He said. I'm scared of that too. Sometimes I wake up and have to look at pictures to remember exactly how her smile looked. And it terrifies me. Mia pulled back, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. Really? Really? But then I remember that forgetting the details doesn't mean forgetting the love. Mommy will always be part of our story, even if the memories get fuzzy. They sat together for a long time talking about Sarah. The good parts, her terrible puns, her love of old movies, the way she danced in the kitchen while cooking. The hard parts too. How sick she'd been the last month of her pregnancy. How scared they'd both been. How the universe had taken her just when they thought they were safe. Eventually, Mia's tears slowed. She nestled against Malcolm's side, hiccuping occasionally. "Daddy?" she said quietly. "Are you lonely?" The question caught him off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "Mrs. Chen says you work too hard and don't have enough fun. And you're always tired, and you never go anywhere except work and home and my school stuff." She looked up at him. "Don't you want someone? Like a girlfriend?" Malcolm thought about Naomi, about the way she'd looked in his apartment tonight, vulnerable and beautiful and terrifyingly easy to care about. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but mostly I'm okay. I have you. That's enough. But what about when I grow up? You'll be all alone." "Then I'll get a dog," Malcolm said, trying to lighten the mood. "A big one who sheds everywhere and barks at squirrels." Mia giggled, which was what he'd been hoping for. But her next words stopped him cold. "Would it be okay if you had a girlfriend? I wouldn't be mad." Malcolm's chest constricted. "You wouldn't?" "No. I think Mommy would want you to be happy, and maybe someone nice could make you smile more." She yawned, exhaustion finally catching up with the emotional storm. "Like that lady from work you've been meeting. Mrs. Chen says you seem different after you see her." Malcolm made a mental note to have a conversation with Mrs. Chen about boundaries. "It's complicated, Bug," he said. "Grown-up stuff is always complicated," Mia said wisely. Then she was asleep, her head heavy on his shoulder, her breathing evening out into the rhythm of childhood unconsciousness. Malcolm sat there holding her, his mind churning. The fake relationship with Naomi had seemed simple enough. A transaction, a favor, 2 weeks of performance, and then back to normal life. But nothing about it felt simple anymore, and he was beginning to suspect normal life might not be possible after this. Friday evening arrived with the inevitability of a tidal wave. Malcolm dropped Mia at Mrs. Chen's. She was recovered from last night's emotional breakdown and excited about a promised craft project involving excessive glitter, and drove to Morton's Steakhouse with his stomach in knots. Naomi was already there, seated at a corner table with a woman who could only be her sister. Victoria was beautiful in the same way Patricia was beautiful, polished, perfect, and slightly terrifying. Beside her sat a man in his 40s with prematurely gray hair and the cautious expression of someone who'd learned to navigate dangerous social waters. "Malcolm!" Naomi stood as he approached, her smile warm but her eyes carrying a warning. "You made it. This is my sister Victoria and her husband Harrison." Handshakes all around. Harrison's grip was firm but friendly. Victoria's was limp and dismissive. "So you're the mysterious boyfriend," Victoria said, studying him the way a scientist might study a specimen. "Naomi's been remarkably secretive about you." "We value our privacy," Malcolm said, taking the seat beside Naomi. Under the table, her hand found his, squeezing hard. A lifeline or a warning, he wasn't sure. "How refreshing," Victoria said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "Tell me, Malcolm, what is it you do?" Naomi mentioned something about architecture. "I'm a draftsman at Carter & Associates," Malcolm said. "I work on residential and commercial projects, translating design concepts into technical blueprints." "A draftsman?" Victoria managed to make it sound like he'd said sewage worker. "How interesting. And you met Naomi at work?" "Book club, actually," Naomi interjected smoothly. "I told you this already, Victoria." "Did you? I must have forgotten." Victoria's smile was sharp. "Book club. How quaint. What was the book?" "The Architecture of Happiness," Malcolm said. "We disagreed about pretty much everything. It was a great conversation." "Naomi does love to argue," Victoria said. "It's why she's so good at business. She never backs down, even when she should." Harrison cleared his throat. "The weather's been lovely this week, hasn't it?" Bless him for trying. The waiter arrived and they ordered. Malcolm chose a mid-range steak, acutely aware of the prices on the menu and the fact that this meal would cost him more than his weekly grocery budget. Naomi ordered for both of them. She knew he was overwhelmed, and added a bottle of wine that probably cost more than his car payment. "So Malcolm," Victoria said once the waiter departed, "Naomi tells us you're a widower. I'm so sorry for your loss." She said it with the sympathy of someone reading from a script. "Thank you," Malcolm said. "It was difficult. Still is sometimes. But I have my daughter. She keeps me grounded." "A daughter. How old?" 8. And how does she feel about her father dating again? Victoria's eyes gleamed. Children can be so territorial about their parents' affections. Malcolm felt Naomi's hand tighten on his, a warning to tread carefully. Mia's actually been very supportive, he said honestly. She wants me to be happy, and she adores Naomi. That last part was a lie, given Mia had never met Naomi, but it rolled off his tongue with surprising ease. Does she? Victoria turned to Naomi. You've met the daughter? That's quite serious. Of course I've met her, Naomi said. We've been together 6 months. I'm part of Malcolm's life, which means being part of Mia's life, too. And what about Elijah? Has he met Malcolm? Malcolm could feel the trap closing. They'd prepared for this, but Victoria's delivery was surgical. Not yet, Naomi said, her voice steady. Elijah's young, and I want to be certain before introducing that dynamic. It's about protecting him. Protecting him from what? A relationship you're supposedly serious about? Victoria took a sip of water. Or are you not actually that serious? Victoria, Harrison said quietly. That's enough. I'm just asking questions, Victoria said innocently. Getting to know my sister's boyfriend. Surely that's allowed. It's a fair question, Malcolm said, drawing Victoria's attention back to him. The truth is, I've asked Naomi to introduce me to Elijah multiple times. But she's protective of him, and I respect that. When she's ready, it'll happen. Until then, I'm patient. Patient, Victoria repeated. How convenient. It's called being a decent human being, Naomi said, her voice tight. Not that you'd understand that concept. The table went silent. Harrison looked like he wanted to disappear. Victoria's smile turned glacial. Excuse me? Victoria said softly. You heard me. Naomi leaned forward. You've been taking shots at Malcolm since he sat down, questioning his job, his daughter, his relationship with me. Why? What did he do to earn your disdain besides exist? I'm protecting you, Victoria said, from making another mistake like Kieran. Kieran was your mistake, Naomi shot back. You're the one who introduced us, who insisted he was perfect for me, who told me I was being too picky when I had doubts. And when it fell apart, you said it was my fault for being too focused on work. Because you were. You are. So what? Since when is ambition a character flaw? Oh wait, that's right. Only when women have it. Harrison can work 80-hour weeks and he's dedicated. I do it and I'm neglecting my family. That's not fair, Victoria said, but there was less certainty in her voice. None of this is fair, Naomi said. You get to be perfect Dr. Carter with your perfect family and your perfect life, and I get to be the screw-up little sister who can't even maintain a relationship. Well, guess what? I am maintaining one. With someone who sees me as a person, not a project, who doesn't need me to be perfect because he's not perfect either. Malcolm's chest constricted. She was defending him with genuine anger, genuine passion. This wasn't performance anymore. This was real. Naomi, he said quietly, his hand on her arm. It's okay. It's not okay, Naomi said, but she was looking at him now and some of the anger drained from her face. You're a good man. You don't deserve this. Their eyes held for a moment too long. Something passed between them, recognition, maybe, or acknowledgement of whatever this was becoming. Victoria watched them, her expression shifting from smug to confused to something that might have been concern. I apologize, she said stiffly. I was out of line. Malcolm seems perfectly adequate. Wow, Harrison muttered. That's quite the endorsement. Despite everything, Malcolm laughed. It broke the tension, and even Naomi's mouth twitched. The rest of dinner was less combative. Victoria backed off. Harrison told stories about his cases that were actually entertaining, and Naomi gradually relaxed beside Malcolm. They ate. They drank wine. They played the role of couple so convincingly that Malcolm sometimes forgot it was a role. Under the table, Naomi's hand stayed in his. Her thumb traced absent patterns on his palm. A nervous gesture, maybe. Or something else. When dessert arrived, something chocolate and decadent that they shared from one plate, Victoria watched them with an expression Malcolm couldn't quite read. You're different with him, she said to Naomi. Softer. Is that a compliment or a criticism? Naomi asked. An observation. Victoria paused. For what it's worth, I hope I'm wrong about my concerns. You deserve to be happy. It was probably the closest thing to an apology Malcolm was going to get. They said their goodbyes on the sidewalk outside the restaurant. Harrison shook Malcolm's hand with genuine warmth, and Victoria offered a small nod that felt like détente. Then it was just Malcolm and Naomi, standing in the cool night air with the city humming around them. I'm sorry, Naomi said immediately. She was awful, and I lost my temper, and— Don't apologize, Malcolm interrupted. You were defending me. It was— He searched for the right word. Nice. Nice? Naomi laughed, slightly hysterical. I almost threw wine at my sister in a public restaurant. That's not nice. That's unhinged. That's human, Malcolm corrected. And for the record, Victoria had it coming. Naomi smiled, shaking her head. You're too kind. She probably thinks you're boring now, too passive. I don't care what Victoria thinks. Malcolm meant it. I care what you think. She looked up at him, and in the streetlight her eyes were impossibly dark. I think you're one of the best people I've ever met. And I think I'm very lucky you agreed to this insane plan. The wedding's in 8 days, Malcolm said. Think we're ready? After tonight, we could convince anyone. But her smile faded. Malcolm, I need to tell you something. His stomach dropped at her tone. Okay. When I was defending you in there, when I was talking about how you see me as a person, how you don't need me to be perfect, I wasn't acting. She took a breath. I meant it, and that scares me. Malcolm's heart was pounding. Naomi, I know this is supposed to be fake, she continued, talking faster now. I know we have rules and boundaries and this is just a transaction, but it doesn't feel fake anymore, at least not to me. And I don't know what to do about that. They stood there on the sidewalk, the confession hanging between them like something fragile and dangerous. Malcolm could step back, reinforce the boundaries, remind them both that this was temporary, that in 8 days they'd attend a wedding and then return to their separate lives. Instead, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. Naomi made a small sound of surprise, then melted into him, her hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him closer. The kiss was soft and desperate and perfect, tasting of chocolate and wine and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Naomi looked stunned. That was, she started. Real, Malcolm finished. That was real. She nodded slowly. What do we do now? I have no idea, Malcolm admitted. But we have 8 days to figure it out. Naomi laughed, leaning her forehead against his chest. This is so complicated. Everything worth having is, Malcolm said. And as he held her there under the streetlights, the wedding looming ahead, and their carefully constructed performance crumbling around them, Malcolm realized he'd stopped pretending days ago. The question was, had Naomi? They didn't talk about the kiss. For 3 days, Malcolm and Naomi circled around what had happened on that sidewalk like it was a live grenade neither wanted to acknowledge. Their text messages remained professional, brief exchanges about wedding logistics and timing. When they spoke on the phone to finalize travel arrangements, they stayed carefully in safe territory. The weather forecast for the Hamptons, what time they'd need to leave, whether Malcolm's suit needed alterations. Neither of them mentioned that everything had changed. Malcolm told himself it was for the best. They had a job to do. Get through the wedding, satisfy Naomi's family, maintain the illusion. Complicating things with real feelings would only make the inevitable ending messier. In 8 days, this would be over. They'd go back to their separate floors at Carter and Associates, back to CEO and draftsman, back to the natural order of things. Except he couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd kissed him back, the way her hands had pulled him closer like she was drowning, and he was air. On Wednesday afternoon, Malcolm was reviewing structural calculations when his desk phone rang. The caller ID showed an internal extension from the 5th floor. His heart jumped before his brain could catch up. Malcolm Reed, he answered, keeping his voice neutral. Mr. Reed, this is Jennifer from Mrs. Carter's office. The assistant's voice was crisp, professional. Mrs. Carter would like to see you in her office at 4 o'clock. Does that work with your schedule? Malcolm glanced at his watch. 2 hours. Yes, that's fine. Excellent. 5th floor, you know the way. The line went dead before he could ask what this was about. For the next 2 hours, Malcolm's concentration was shot. He stared at blueprints without seeing them, his mind spinning through possibilities. Maybe she was calling it off. Maybe she'd realized this was too complicated, too risky. Maybe the kiss had scared her as much as it had terrified him. At 3:55, he took the elevator to the 5th floor. Jennifer, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the demeanor of someone who managed chaos for a living, looked up from her desk. "Go right in," she said. "She's expecting you." Malcolm knocked once and entered. Naomi's office looked different in daylight. Less aquarium, more command center. Her desk was covered in project files and her laptop displayed what looked like a budget spreadsheet. She stood at the windows, her back to the door, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. "Close the door," she said without turning around. Malcolm did, his pulse quickening. Naomi turned to face him. She was in full CEO mode. Tailored dress, hair in its severe bun, expression unreadable. But her eyes gave her away. They were uncertain, vulnerable in a way that made Malcolm's chest ache. "We need to talk about what happened Friday night," she said. "Okay," Malcolm said carefully. "I kissed you back." "I noticed." "That wasn't part of the plan." "No," Malcolm agreed. "It wasn't." Naomi crossed her arms, a defensive gesture that looked out of place on someone usually so controlled. "I've been trying to figure out what that means. For us. For this arrangement." "And what did you figure out?" "That I have no idea." She laughed without humor. "I'm the CEO of a 75-person firm. I make million-dollar decisions every day. But this, you? I don't know what to do." Malcolm stayed where he was, giving her space. "What do you want to do?" "I want to pretend it didn't happen. Go to the wedding, play our parts, and then go back to normal." She met his eyes. "But I don't think I can." "Because?" "Because I can't stop thinking about you." The confession came out raw, honest. "Because for the first time in 4 years, I feel like someone actually sees me. Not the CEO, not the Carter daughter, not the failed fiancé or the absent mother, just me. And it's terrifying." Malcolm's throat tightened. "Naomi." "I'm your boss," she interrupted. "Technically, there are power dynamics and HR policies and 100 reasons this is a terrible idea." "I know. We live completely different lives, different worlds. I make in a month what you make in a year. My family will never accept you. My career comes first, always. I'm a terrible bet for anyone, let alone someone like you." "Someone like me?" Malcolm asked quietly. "Good, kind. Someone who deserves better than whatever broken pieces I can offer." She pressed her palms against her desk, leaning on it like she needed the support. "You should walk away, Malcolm. Right now. Tell me this wedding is a mistake, and we should cancel." Malcolm crossed the office in 3 strides. He stopped in front of her desk, close enough to see the fear in her eyes. "What if I don't want to walk away?" Naomi's breath caught. "Then you're an idiot." "Probably." He smiled slightly. "But I'm an idiot who kissed you first, so I don't get to claim the moral high ground." "This is insane. You keep saying that because it keeps being true." But her voice had softened, and when she looked at him, the walls were crumbling. "Malcolm, I don't know how to do this. A real relationship. I don't have time. I don't have the emotional capacity. I don't—" "Then we figure it out together," Malcolm said. "Or we don't. Maybe we go to this wedding and it's a disaster and we realize we have nothing in common. Maybe the attraction fades. Maybe reality kills whatever this is before it even starts. That's bleak. Or maybe," he continued, "we give it a real shot after the wedding. No pretending, no performance, just 2 people seeing if there's something worth exploring." Naomi stared at him. "You'd be willing to try, knowing all the complications?" "Naomi, I'm a widowed single father who works a job I'm overqualified for because it gives me flexibility with my daughter. Complicated is my baseline. You don't scare me." "I should," she said, but she was smiling now. A real smile that reached her eyes. "Probably," Malcolm agreed, "but you don't." They stood there on opposite sides of her desk, the city sprawling below them, the wedding looming ahead. The moment felt suspended, fragile. Then Naomi's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and grimaced. My mother, confirming our arrival time Saturday. She looked back at Malcolm. So we're really doing this? The wedding and whatever comes after? If you want to. I want to. The words came out firm, decided. I'm terrified, but I want to. Then we'll be terrified together, Malcolm said. Naomi came around the desk, and for a moment Malcolm thought she might kiss him again. Instead, she held out her hand. Partners? She said. For real this time? Malcolm took her hand, feeling the now familiar spark of contact. Partners. Her fingers tightened on his. The wedding's in 5 days. After that, we tell my family the truth, that this started as a favor but became something real. We deal with the fallout together. And work? We disclose to HR after the wedding, establish clear boundaries, make sure everyone knows this isn't affecting our professional relationship. She smiled wryly. Though given we barely interact professionally, it should be fine. Your mother's going to kill me, Malcolm said. My mother will have opinions, Naomi corrected. But my life isn't hers to control anymore. I'm done living for other people's expectations. The conviction in her voice made Malcolm believe her. They talked for another hour, hammering out logistics. The drive to the Hamptons would take 3 hours. They'd arrive Friday evening for the rehearsal dinner. The wedding was Saturday afternoon, followed by a reception that would probably last until midnight. Sunday morning brunch with the family, then back to the city. 48 hours of intensive Carter family exposure. Malcolm was already exhausted thinking about it. One more thing, Naomi said as he was leaving. Mia, when do I meet her? For real, not just in stories we tell my family. The question caught Malcolm off guard. In all their planning, they hadn't discussed the reality of blending their actual lives, the kids who would be affected by whatever happened between them. After the wedding, he said, let's get through this first. Then we can talk about introducing you to Mia and me meeting Elijah. Do it right. Naomi nodded, relief evident on her face. That makes sense. One crisis at a time. Exactly. Malcolm paused at the door. Naomi, thank you for being honest about what you want. Thank you for not running when I gave you the chance, she said. As Malcolm rode the elevator back to the 4th floor, he tried to process what had just happened. In the span of an hour, a fake relationship had become a real one. The performance had transformed into something genuine and terrifying and full of possibility. He should probably be panicking. Instead, he felt oddly calm. Like something that had been off balance for 3 years had finally settled into place. His phone buzzed with a text from Naomi. I'm still terrified, by the way. Malcolm smiled and typed back. Me too, but it's a good kind of terrified. Is there a good kind? The kind that means you're about to do something worth doing. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I really like you, Malcolm Reed. His chest constricted with something that felt dangerously close to hope. I really like you too, Naomi Carter. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Malcolm took his suit to be altered, invested in new shoes that didn't look like he'd bought them at a discount store, and had an excruciating conversation with Mia about why he'd be gone for the weekend. It's just a work thing, he said, hating the half-truth. Mia studied him with those 2 knowing eyes. The same work thing with the lady from book club? He really needed to be more careful around his perceptive daughter. Yes, Miss Carter and I have to attend a professional event together. Is she your girlfriend now? Malcolm froze. What makes you think that? Because you smile different when you talk about her, and you've been nicer, less sad. Mia tilted her head. It's okay if she is. I told you that. It's complicated, Bug. We're still figuring things out. Grown-ups always say that when they like someone but are scared to admit it, Mia said with 8-year-old wisdom. Malcolm pulled her into a hug. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just finally noticed. He laughed despite the anxiety churning in his gut. I'll be back Sunday afternoon. You'll stay with Mrs. Chen and you have my number if you need anything. I know, Daddy. I'll be fine. She pulled back, suddenly serious. But you should be happy. You deserve to be happy. The simple statement nearly broke him. Since when did children become the emotional support for their parents? I love you, he said. Love you too. Now go pack. Mrs. Chen says you always forget something important. She was right. He always did. Friday arrived with clear skies and unseasonable warmth. Malcolm picked up Naomi at her penthouse apartment at noon, loading her luggage, considerably more than his single duffel bag, into his aging sedan. "We could have taken my car," Naomi said, eyeing his vehicle skeptically. "And show up in a luxury sedan? Your family already thinks I'm after your money. Let's not reinforce that." Malcolm opened the passenger door for her. "Besides, my car has character." "Your car has duct tape holding the side mirror on. See? Character." Despite her protests, Naomi smiled as she slid into the seat. She was dressed casually, jeans and a soft sweater that made her look younger, more approachable. Her hair was down, falling in waves around her face. Without the armor of her business attire, she looked nervous. "Ready for this?" Malcolm asked as he pulled into traffic. "Absolutely not," Naomi said, "but let's go anyway." The drive was easier than Malcolm expected. They talked about everything and nothing, music preferences, terrible movies they secretly loved, childhood memories. Naomi told him about growing up in the Carter household where achievement was expected and failure was unacceptable. Malcolm shared stories about his army days, the friends he'd made, the person he'd been before grief had reshaped him. An hour into the drive, Naomi's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and grimaced. "My mother. I should take this." "Go ahead," Naomi answered with the tone of someone preparing for battle. "Hi, Mom." Even from the driver's seat, Malcolm could hear Patricia Carter's crisp voice issuing instructions, room assignments, dinner timing, expectations for behavior. The conversation lasted 15 minutes, and by the end, Naomi looked exhausted. "Everything okay?" Malcolm asked when she hung up. "She wants to have breakfast with us tomorrow morning, before the wedding, just the three of us." Naomi rubbed her temples. "She says it's to get to know you better, but what she means is she wants one final chance to evaluate whether you're acceptable." "I can handle your mother." "Can you handle her asking about your 5-year plan, your retirement portfolio, your thoughts on private versus public schools?" Naomi's voice carried an edge of hysteria. "Because she will. She'll ask all of it." "Then I'll answer honestly," Malcolm said calmly. "My 5-year plan is to be the best father I can be and maybe finish the community park redesign I've been working on. My retirement portfolio exists but isn't impressive, and I think schools matter less than whether the kid feels supported and challenged." Naomi stared at him. "You're not even a little nervous, are you?" "I'm terrified," Malcolm admitted. "But I spent 2 years in a war zone. Your mother is formidable, but she's not shooting at me. I'll survive." "I wish I had your confidence." "You do," Malcolm said. "You just hide it better." They stopped for coffee at a rest area 2 hours into the drive. While Naomi was in the restroom, Malcolm's phone rang. An unknown number. "Hello? Is this Malcolm Reed?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Catherine Brennan. I'm with the Architectural Digest Foundation. I'm calling because your name was submitted for our Emerging Designers Grant Program." Malcolm's brain stuttered. "I'm sorry, what?" "Our grant program identifies talented architects and designers who deserve wider recognition. Someone submitted your portfolio, specifically your community park project and several residential redesigns. The selection committee was very impressed." "I didn't submit anything," Malcolm said, confused. "The nomination came from within your firm." "A Ms. Carter. She included a recommendation letter describing your work as innovative and socially conscious. We'd like to invite you to present your portfolio to the full committee next month." Malcolm's chest tightened. Naomi had done this. Without telling him. She'd submitted his work to a prestigious grant program. "Mr. Reed, are you still there?" "Yes. Sorry, I'm just surprised." "Well, it's good surprise, I hope. The grant includes $15,000 for professional development and guaranteed publication in our winter issue. If you're interested, we can send over the details." "Yes," Malcolm heard himself say. "Yes, I'm very interested." He gave her his email address and hung up just as Naomi returned with 2 coffees. "You look weird," she said, handing him a cup. "What happened?" "I just got a call from Architectural Digest Foundation about a grant program." He studied her face. "You submitted my work, didn't you?" Naomi had the grace to look slightly guilty. "I may have. When? 2 weeks ago, after I saw your park redesign. She shifted her weight, defensive. You're too talented to be stuck on the fourth floor doing other people's grunt work. You should be designing, creating, pushing boundaries. So I submitted your portfolio. If you're mad, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. Malcolm set down his coffee and pulled her into a hug. She stiffened in surprise, then relaxed against him. Thank you, he said into her hair. Nobody's ever done anything like that for me. You're welcome. Her voice was muffled against his chest. Did you get it? I have to present to the committee, but they're interested. Naomi pulled back, her face lit with genuine joy. Malcolm, that's amazing. The Architectural Digest grant is huge. It could change your career. It could change a lot of things, he agreed. They stood there in the parking lot of a highway rest area, holding each other while trucks rumbled past and other travelers moved around them. It wasn't romantic in any conventional sense, but it felt important, real. We should get back on the road, Naomi said eventually. We're supposed to be at the estate by 5. Right, can't be late for the rehearsal dinner, where my family will spend 3 hours judging everything about you. Looking forward to it, Malcolm lied. Naomi laughed, and the sound was bright enough to chase away some of his anxiety. They arrived at the Hampton estate at 4:45. The venue was exactly as intimidating as Malcolm had imagined. A sprawling waterfront property with manicured gardens, a white-columned mansion, and enough acreage to host a small country. Cars lined the circular driveway, expensive sedans and luxury SUVs that made Malcolm's duct-taped sedan look like a punchline. Still time to turn around, Naomi said quietly. Not a chance. Malcolm put the car in park. We've come this far. Let's finish it. A valet appeared, looking dubiously at Malcolm's vehicle, but taking the keys professionally. Staff in crisp uniforms directed them to the guest house, where they'd been assigned rooms. Separate rooms, Naomi had insisted, despite her mother's assumption they'd share. Some boundaries still needed maintaining. Malcolm's room was nicer than any hotel he'd ever stayed in. King bed with Egyptian cotton sheets. Marble bathroom. A view of the gardens that probably cost more to maintain than his annual salary. He unpacked his duffel, hanging his newly altered suit with care. Checked his phone. A text from Mia. Pictures of her and Mrs. Chen baking cookies. His daughter's face was covered in flour, her smile bright. The normalcy of it grounded him. A knock on the door. Naomi stood in the hallway, changed into a cocktail dress that was elegant and understated and absolutely devastating. Wow, Malcolm said. Too much? She looked uncertain. Perfect. You look perfect. Pink touched her cheeks. You clean up pretty well yourself. Malcolm glanced down at his suit. This old thing? Liar. You bought new shoes. Noticed that, did you? I notice everything about you, Naomi said, then looked startled by her own honesty. The rehearsal dinner starts in 20 minutes. We should go down. Before we do, Malcolm said, I want to say something. Okay. Whatever happens tonight, tomorrow, with your family. We're in this together. You're not alone. Naomi's eyes shimmered. How do you always know exactly what I need to hear? Lucky guess, Malcolm said. She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. The gesture was becoming familiar, comfortable, like it belonged. Let's do this, she said. They walked down to the main house hand in hand, ready to face whatever the Carter family threw at them. The rehearsal dinner was held on the terrace overlooking the water. 50 guests milled about with champagne and canapes, the kind of effortlessly elegant gathering that Malcolm had only seen in movies. He recognized several faces from the briefing document Naomi's assistant had sent. Cousins, aunts, family friends, people who belonged in this world of old money and older expectations. Patricia spotted them immediately, gliding over with the precision of a guided missile. She kissed Naomi's cheek and extended a hand to Malcolm. Malcolm, so glad you could make it. Thank you for having me, Patricia. Her eyes swept over him, cataloging and assessing. The suit is an improvement. Nordstrom? Brooks Brothers, Malcolm said, which was true. He'd splurged. She turned to Naomi. Your father wants to speak with you. Something about the firm. He's in the library. It was clearly a dismissal. Naomi squeezed Malcolm's hand. Will you be okay? I'll survive, he said. She left reluctantly, and Malcolm found himself alone with Patricia Carter. Walk with me, Patricia said. It wasn't a request. They strolled through the gardens, away from the crowd. The evening sun painted everything gold, and the sound of the ocean was a distant rhythm. You care about my daughter, Patricia said. Not a question. Yes. Why? The directness caught Malcolm off guard. Why do I care about her? Yes. What do you see in Naomi that makes you willing to endure this? Patricia gestured back at the party. My family's scrutiny, the complications of her career, her son, her history. What's the appeal? Malcolm thought about deflecting, giving a safe answer, but Patricia Carter didn't strike him as someone who appreciated dishonesty. I see someone who carries the weight of the world on her shoulders and never asks for help, he said. Someone brilliant and capable who's been told her whole life that her worth is measured in achievements. Someone who's forgotten that being loved isn't about being perfect. Patricia was silent for a long moment. You barely know her. I know her better than you think, and I'd like the chance to know her more. She'll break your heart, Patricia said. Her work comes first. It always has. It always will. You'll be an afterthought. Maybe, Malcolm said. Or maybe she just needs someone who doesn't make her choose, who supports her ambitions instead of resenting them. Patricia stopped walking, turning to face him fully. In the fading light, she looked older, tired in a way her makeup couldn't hide. I want my daughter to be happy, she said quietly. I don't always know how to show it, but I do want that. Then let her define what happiness looks like, Malcolm said, instead of imposing your definition on her. Patricia's laugh was sharp, but not unkind. You're braver than you look, Malcolm Reed. I've been through worse than intimidating mothers. I'm sure you have. She studied him. My husband built an empire. I raised 2 daughters to be exceptional. Victoria succeeded by every conventional measure. Naomi succeeded too, but she did it her way, and that terrified us. We pushed too hard, expected too much, and now she thinks she has to be perfect to be worthy of love. The admission surprised Malcolm. This was more honesty than he'd expected from Patricia Carter. She is worthy, Malcolm said, exactly as she is. Then prove it, Patricia said. Show her that someone can love her without needing her to be anything other than herself. If you can do that, you'll have my blessing. If you can't, walk away before you cause more damage. She left him standing in the garden, her words echoing in his head. The rehearsal dinner was a masterclass in social warfare disguised as celebration. Malcolm sat between Naomi and a cousin who spent 20 minutes explaining his hedge fund with the assumption that Malcolm couldn't possibly understand finance. Across the table, Victoria watched them with the intensity of a scientist observing a particularly interesting experiment. The bride and groom were nice enough, a couple in their late 20s who seemed genuinely in love and slightly overwhelmed by the production their families had created. The groom's parents were warm, salt-of-the-earth people who looked as out of place as Malcolm felt. First Carter wedding? The groom's father asked Malcolm during a lull in conversation. First and hopefully last, Malcolm said, then realized how that sounded. I mean, the man laughed. I know what you meant. These people know how to throw a party, but it's exhausting keeping up with all the social rules. My wife and I have been married 30 years, and we eloped. Best decision we ever made. Sounds smart. It was practical. We were broke college students who wanted to be married more than we wanted a show. He glanced at Naomi, who was deep in conversation with the bride. That your lady? Yeah, that's Naomi. She's beautiful, but she looks tense. Her family has high expectations. Don't they all? The man raised his glass. Here's to exceeding expectations by ignoring them entirely. Malcolm clinked glasses with him, grateful for the moment of normal in the middle of the performance. The dinner stretched past 10 o'clock. Speeches, toasts, laughter that sounded slightly forced. Malcolm played his role. Attentive boyfriend, interested guest, acceptable addition to the Carter family circle. And through it all, Naomi stayed close, her hand finding his under the table, her smile genuine when she looked at him. Finally, mercifully, the evening ended. Guests drifted away to rooms or cars. Malcolm and Naomi walked back to the guest house in companionable silence, the sound of the ocean accompanying them. "You survived," Naomi said as they climbed the stairs. "Barely. My mother cornered you. What did she say?" Malcolm considered how much to share. "She told me I should prove I can love you without needing you to be perfect." Naomi stopped outside her door. "She said that?" "More or less." "And what did you say?" "That I'd try." He turned to face her. "Naomi, I know tomorrow is going to be intense. Your ex will probably be there. Your family will be watching. The pressure will be on. But I want you to know something." "What?" "This stopped being fake for me a while ago. I'm not here because I owe you a favor. I'm here because I want to be. With you." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "Malcolm, you don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I just needed you to know, before tomorrow, before everything gets complicated again." She stepped forward, cupping his face in her hands. "It stopped being fake for me, too. I'm terrified of what that means, but it's true." They kissed there in the hallway, slow and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "Get some sleep," Malcolm said. "Big day tomorrow." "Yeah." Naomi didn't move, her hand still on his face. "Malcolm, thank you for being here, for being you." "Anytime," he said. And as he lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling while moonlight painted patterns on the walls, Malcolm realized he meant it. Whatever came next, the wedding, the aftermath, the reality of trying to build something real with Naomi Carter, he was all in. The pretending was over. Now came the hard part, living it for real. Morning arrived too early and too bright. Malcolm woke to sunlight streaming through windows he'd forgotten to cover, and the immediate anxiety of knowing today was the main event. The wedding. The culmination of 2 weeks of careful construction and increasingly complicated emotions. He checked his phone. 7:30. A text from Naomi sent 20 minutes ago. "Breakfast with my mother in an hour. Meet me downstairs at 8:15. Wear armor." Malcolm smiled despite his nerves and typed back, "Does coffee count as armor? Only if it's weaponized." He showered, shaved with more care than usual, and dressed in casual clothes that still somehow felt like costume pieces in this world of inherited wealth. When he made his way downstairs, Naomi was already waiting in the guest house lobby. She wore a sundress that made her look impossibly young, her hair loose around her shoulders. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Rough night?" Malcolm asked. "Couldn't sleep? Kept thinking about today." She managed a tight smile. "Ready to face the firing squad?" "Lead the way." They found Patricia on the main house terrace, presiding over a breakfast spread that could have fed a small army. Fresh fruit, pastries, eggs prepared 3 different ways, juice in crystal pitchers. She was already perfectly composed despite the early hour, her silver hair gleaming in the morning light. "Good morning," Patricia said. "I hope you both slept well." The pleasantry sounded like an accusation. Malcolm pulled out a chair for Naomi before sitting down himself. "The accommodations are beautiful," he said. "Thank you again for including me." Patricia poured coffee with the precision of someone performing surgery. "Naomi tells me you have a daughter, Mia." "Mia, isn't it?" "Yes, she's 8. And she's comfortable with you being away this weekend?" Children can be so attached at that age. Malcolm accepted the coffee, recognizing the probe for what it was. "She's staying with a neighbor we trust. Mrs. Chen has been part of our lives since my wife passed. Mia loves her." "How convenient." Patricia's tone was neutral, which somehow made it more cutting. "And what does Mia think of her father dating again?" "She wants me to be happy," Malcolm said honestly. "She's a remarkably understanding kid." "Children often are, when adults give them no choice." Patricia turned to Naomi. "Have you introduced Malcolm to Elijah?" Naomi's hand tightened on her coffee cup. "Not yet. We're taking things slowly." "Slowly," Patricia repeated. "You've been together 6 months according to your story. At what point does slowly become avoidance?" "When I'm ready," Naomi said, steel entering her voice. "Elijah's well-being comes first. I won't introduce someone into his life unless I'm certain about the relationship." "And are you? Certain?" The question hung in the air. Malcolm felt the weight of it, the trap carefully laid. If Naomi said yes, Patricia would question the speed. If she said no, Patricia would question why Malcolm was here at all. Naomi met her mother's eyes without flinching. I'm certain that Malcolm is someone worth taking seriously. The rest we'll figure out together. How diplomatic. Patricia buttered a croissant with methodical precision. Malcolm, I'll ask you directly. What are your intentions with my daughter? To support her in whatever way she needs, Malcolm said. To be a partner, not a project. To see her as a person, not as the sum of her accomplishments or failures. Very pretty words, but intentions are easy. Actions matter. She set down her knife. Naomi has responsibilities. The firm. Her son. A public profile that requires careful management. Can you handle being secondary to all of that? I don't see it as secondary, Malcolm said. I see it as her life, the life she built before I came along. I'm not asking her to change that. I'm asking to be part of it. Patricia studied him for a long moment. You're either very secure or very naive. Maybe both, Malcolm admitted. Despite herself, Patricia's mouth twitched, almost a smile. They ate breakfast, making careful small talk about the wedding logistics, the weather, the beauty of the venue. Naomi was quiet, picking at her food, tension radiating from her shoulders. Malcolm wanted to reach for her hand, but sensed Patricia was watching for exactly that kind of gesture. Finally, Patricia set down her napkin with finality. I'll be direct. When Naomi told me about you, I was skeptical. You're not the kind of man I imagined for her. You're not ambitious in the traditional sense. You're not wealthy or connected. You're not even particularly impressive on paper. Mother, Naomi said sharply. Patricia held up a hand. Let me finish. But after observing you these past 2 days, I've come to a conclusion. You're exactly what Naomi needs. The statement shocked them both into silence. You see her, Patricia continued. Not the CEO, not the Carter legacy, not the perfect daughter I tried to create. You see the woman beneath all that. The one who's been drowning under expectations her entire life. Her voice softened almost imperceptibly. I pushed too hard. I wanted her to have everything, and in doing so, I made her think she had to be everything. But you let her be enough. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. Mom, I'm not good at this, Patricia said. Emotions, vulnerability. Your father and I built our lives on strength and achievement, but watching you struggle these past years, especially after Kieran, I realized strength isn't the same as happiness. She looked at Malcolm. Make her happy. That's all I'm asking. Make her remember what happiness feels like. I'll try, Malcolm said, his throat tight. Patricia stood, smoothing her dress. The ceremony begins at 3. Family photos at 2. Don't be late. She left, and Naomi immediately broke down. Malcolm moved his chair closer, pulling her into his arms while she cried against his shoulder. Not the desperate sobs from that first night in her office, but the release of years of pressure finally acknowledged. I didn't know she felt that way, Naomi said when she could speak. I thought she just saw me as a disappointment. You were never a disappointment, Malcolm said. You were just human, and that scared her because she didn't know how to protect you from being hurt. Naomi pulled back, wiping her eyes. How are you so wise about this? I'm not wise. I just know what it's like to love someone and be terrified you're failing them. He thought of Mia, of all the ways he worried he was screwing up single parenthood. Your mother loves you. She's just terrible at showing it. The Carter family legacy, Naomi said with a watery laugh. Feelings are weakness. Vulnerability is failure. Then we'll build a different legacy, Malcolm said. One where it's okay to fall apart sometimes. She kissed him then, soft and grateful. When they finally made their way back to the guest house to prepare for the wedding, something had shifted. The performance was still ahead of them, but the stakes felt different. Less about proving something to Naomi's family and more about proving it to themselves. The hours between breakfast and the ceremony passed in a blur of preparation. Malcolm showered, dressed in his suit with the care of someone suiting up for battle. He checked his phone, messages from Mia and Mrs. Chen, pictures of them at the park. His real life, continuing without him. A knock on the door. Malcolm expected Naomi, but instead found Richard Carter standing in the hallway. Naomi's father looked older than in his photos, the stroke's aftermath evident in the slight droop of his mouth and the cane he leaned on. But his eyes were sharp, assessing. "Mr. Carter?" Malcolm said, surprised. "Please, come in." Richard entered slowly, his movements careful. He settled into the armchair by the window, gesturing for Malcolm to sit. "I wanted to talk before the circus begins," Richard said. His voice was slightly slurred, but clear enough. "My wife tells me you're serious about my daughter." "Yes, sir, I am." "And you understand what that means? The scrutiny, the expectations, the complications of being with someone like Naomi?" "I'm beginning to," Malcolm said honestly. Richard nodded, studying him. "I built Carter and Associates from nothing. Worked 80-hour weeks for 30 years. Won awards, made millions, created something that would outlast me." He paused. "And it nearly cost me everything that mattered. My marriage, my relationship with my daughters, my health." Malcolm stayed quiet, sensing this wasn't a conversation that required input. "When I had my stroke, I was in the office, working on a Saturday night while Patricia was at home alone and my daughters were living their lives without me in them." Richard's hand tightened on his cane. "The doctors said stress, poor health choices, relentless pressure. But really, it was priorities. I chose wrong, every single day. And eventually my body made the choice for me." "I'm sorry," Malcolm said. "Don't be sorry. Be smarter than I was." Richard met his eyes. "Naomi is brilliant. She saved the firm when I couldn't. But she's making my mistakes. Working herself to death, sacrificing everything for achievement, believing her worth is measured in contracts and profit margins." "She's trying to prove herself," Malcolm said, "to live up to what you built." "She already has. She surpassed it." Richard's voice carried an edge of sadness. "But I never told her that. I just kept pushing, expecting more, because that's what I knew. And now she can't stop pushing herself." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you have a choice I didn't make soon enough. You can support her ambition, or you can challenge it. Most people will do the former, tell her she's amazing, encourage her to work harder, validate the self-destruction. But what she needs is someone who will challenge her, who will ask if this is really what she wants, or just what she thinks she should want." Malcolm considered this. "That's a risky approach. She might resent me for it." "She might," Richard agreed. "But at least she'll be alive and present to resent you, unlike if you let her continue on this path until she collapses." He stood slowly, leaning on his cane. "I can't undo my mistakes, but maybe you can keep her from repeating them." He left before Malcolm could respond, the door closing with soft finality. The ceremony was held in the estate's garden, rows of white chairs arranged before an arch draped in flowers overlooking the water. 300 guests in designer clothes, drinking champagne and making polite conversation while waiting for the bride to appear. Malcolm found his seat in the family section, painfully aware of the scrutiny. He could feel the curious glances, the whispered speculation. Who was he? Where had he come from? Was he really good enough for Naomi Carter? Naomi arrived moments later, breathtaking in a deep blue dress that complemented her coloring perfectly. She slid into the seat beside him, her hand immediately finding his. "You okay?" she whispered. "Your father came to see me." Her eyes widened. "What did he say?" "That I should challenge you, ask the hard questions, not just support whatever you do." Naomi was quiet for a moment. "That sounds like him. Even when he's being supportive, he's issuing instructions. Is he wrong?" She looked at him, something vulnerable in her expression. "No, he's not wrong. I do need someone who will push back. I'm just not used to anyone doing it." Music swelled, cutting off their conversation. The ceremony began. Malcolm had been to exactly 3 weddings in his life: his own, his sister's, and a military buddy's quickie courthouse affair. This was different. This was theater. The bride was lovely, the groom visibly emotional, the vows heartfelt despite the production surrounding them. But what struck Malcolm most was watching Naomi's face as the couple exchanged rings. She looked wistful, hopeful, like she was witnessing something she'd stopped believing could be real. When the ceremony ended and guests migrated toward the reception tent, Malcolm caught Naomi's arm. You okay? Just thinking about what they promised each other, for better or worse, in sickness and health, all of it. She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. I was engaged once. We never got to the actual wedding. But I remember planning it, imagining saying those vows, believing we'd meant them. What happened? Reality happened. Kieran wanted a wife who would elevate his status. I wanted a partner who saw me as an equal. Those two things couldn't coexist. She watched the bride and groom posing for photos, radiant with joy. I hope they make it. I hope they actually mean what they promised. Some people do, Malcolm said. Did you? With Sarah? The question was gentle, but it still hit hard. Malcolm thought about his wedding day, how young they'd been, how certain he'd felt. We meant it at the time, he said. Whether we would have made it long-term, I'll never know. Death doesn't give you that answer, but I think we would have tried. That counts for something. Yeah, Naomi said softly. It does. They were heading toward the reception tent when a voice stopped them cold. Naomi Carter. As I live and breathe. Malcolm turned to see a man in his mid-30s, handsome in the aggressive way of someone who worked at it. Perfectly tailored suit, artfully styled hair, smile that didn't reach his eyes. The man moved with the confidence of someone used to being the most impressive person in any room. Kieran Phillips. Had to be. Naomi's entire body went rigid. Kieran, I didn't know you'd be here. Marcus and I go way back, couldn't miss his big day. Kieran's eyes slid to Malcolm, assessing and dismissing in one glance. And who's this? Malcolm Reed, Malcolm said, extending his hand. Naomi's boyfriend. Kieran's handshake was unnecessarily firm, a dominance play Malcolm had seen 1,000 times in the military. He didn't take the bait, keeping his own grip neutral. Boyfriend, Kieran repeated, amused. How domestic. And what do you do, Malcolm? I'm an architect, draftsman, specifically. At Carter and Associates? Yes? Kieran's smile widened. So you work for Naomi. How modern, dating the help. Kieran, Naomi said, her voice ice. Don't. Don't what? I'm just making conversation. Getting to know the man who's replaced me. He turned back to Malcolm. Has she told you about us? How we were engaged? How I supposedly broke her heart? She mentioned it, Malcolm said evenly. Did she mention why it ended? Kieran's eyes glittered. I'm curious what version she told you. Malcolm felt Naomi trembling beside him, fury or hurt or both. He wanted to defend her, to shut Kieran down. But something Richard had said echoed in his mind. Challenge her. Don't just support whatever she does. Why don't you tell me your version? Malcolm said. I'd be interested to hear it. Naomi's head whipped toward him, betrayed, but Malcolm kept his eyes on Kieran. Kieran looked delighted. Well, honest answer? Naomi is brilliant, driven, absolutely committed to her work, which is admirable until you realize there's no room for anything else. I proposed because I thought marriage might soften her, give her something to care about besides profit margins. Instead, she took over the firm and made it her entire identity. I wasn't a partner. I was an accessory, something to bring to events and introduce as successful, but never actually integrated into her life. That's not true, Naomi said, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Kieran's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. Naomi, you canceled our engagement dinner to handle a contract negotiation. You forgot my birthday 3 years running. You introduced me as your fiancé at exactly 4 public events in 6 months, and at 3 of them you spent the evening networking instead of being present. I wasn't your partner. I was your backup plan for when work got lonely. Naomi's face had gone pale. You knew who I was when we got engaged. You knew the firm was important to me. Important, yes. The only thing that mattered, no. Kieran's expression was almost pitying. I wanted a wife. You wanted a prestigious accessory who wouldn't demand too much of your time. When I asked you to choose, you chose the firm, and that told me everything I needed to know. He turned to Malcolm. Good luck, man. You're going to need it. Because Naomi Carter doesn't do relationships. She does transactions. And eventually, you'll figure out that you're just another item on her to-do list, slotted between board meetings and site visits. He walked away, leaving devastation in his wake. Naomi stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Around them, wedding guests continued their celebration, oblivious to the personal massacre that had just occurred. Naomi, Malcolm started. Don't. She pulled away from him. Just don't. She fled toward the main house, and Malcolm was left standing alone, his heart breaking for her while Kieran's words echoed in his mind. Was it true? Was Naomi fundamentally incapable of prioritizing a relationship? Or had she just never found someone worth prioritizing over work? Malcolm found her 20 minutes later in the estate's library, curled up in a leather chair with her knees pulled to her chest. She'd ruined her makeup crying, mascara streaking her face, but she looked small and young and shattered. Go away, she said without looking up. Malcolm closed the door behind him and sat in the chair across from her. No. I mean it, Malcolm. I can't do this right now. Can't do what? Face the truth? Because Naomi, he wasn't entirely wrong. Her head snapped up, eyes blazing. Excuse me? Kieran was cruel about it, and he definitely had his own issues, Malcolm said carefully. But some of what he said was accurate. You do put work first. You do struggle to make room for people in your life. And you are terrified of being vulnerable enough to actually need someone. So you're taking his side? Naomi's voice shook. The man who just humiliated me in front of everyone? I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm asking if there's truth in his criticism that you need to face. Unbelievable. Naomi stood, pacing. I bring you to this wedding, introduce you to my family, let you into my life, and you use it to psychoanalyze me? I'm trying to understand you, Malcolm said. Really understand you, not just accept whatever you present to the world. Maybe what I present to the world is all there is, Naomi's voice rose. Maybe I am just work and ambition and cold calculation. Maybe Kieran was right and I'm fundamentally broken and incapable of being what anyone needs. Do you actually believe that? I don't know. She pressed her hands to her temples. I don't know what I believe anymore. I thought I was happy. I thought I had it figured out. But then you showed up and made me question everything, and now I'm standing here at a wedding where I'm supposed to be proving to everyone that I'm fine, and instead I'm falling apart. Malcolm stood, moving toward her slowly. Naomi, listen to me. Kieran was wrong about one critical thing. You're not broken. You're not incapable of love. You're just scared. Of course I'm scared, she said. Every time I've let someone in, they've left. My father emotionally, Kieran literally. Why would you be different? I wouldn't be, Malcolm said honestly. Not if you keep holding me at arm's length. Not if you never actually let me in. But that's your choice, not your nature. Naomi stared at him, tears streaming down her face. What do you want from me, Malcolm? I want you to try, really try. Not just fit me into the margins of your life when it's convenient. Not just keep me as a nice idea that makes you feel less lonely. I want you to choose this, choose us. Even when it's hard, even when work is demanding, even when you're scared. And if I can't? The question hung between them, raw and honest. Then we end this now, Malcolm said, his heart breaking even as he said it. Before we both get hurt worse. Because I'm not interested in being your backup plan, Naomi. I've done that dance. After Sarah died, I dated a few people who wanted the idea of a ready-made family more than they wanted me. I won't do that again, not even for you. Naomi's breath hitched. That's not fair. You can't ask me to choose between you and everything I've built. I'm not asking you to choose between us and your work. I'm asking you to figure out how to make room for both. Because if you can't, then Kieran's right. You don't do relationships, you do transactions, and I deserve more than that. Silence filled the library. Outside, music drifted from the reception, laughter and celebration while their private world crumbled. Finally, Naomi spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I can be what you need. Then figure it out, Malcolm said, before the wedding ends, before we go back to the city and real life hits. Figure out if this is something you actually want or just something that's convenient. He turned to leave, his chest tight with unshed grief. Malcolm. He stopped, hand on the door. I'm terrified of losing you, Naomi said, but I'm more terrified of trying and failing, of proving everyone right, that I'm too damaged, too selfish, too focused on work to ever really love someone. Malcolm turned back to her. Then fail. Try and fail and get back up and try again. That's what relationships are. They're not perfect. They're work, daily work, choosing each other over and over even when it's hard. And if I can't, if I keep choosing wrong, then we'll figure it out together, Malcolm said. But Naomi, you have to actually choose. You have to decide if this is worth the risk. He left her there in the library, surrounded by books and old money and the weight of expectations. His heart was pounding, his hands shaking. He'd just issued an ultimatum to a woman he was falling in love with at her cousin's wedding after her ex-fiancé had torn her apart. Either the bravest or stupidest thing he'd ever done. Malcolm made his way back to the reception, plastering on a neutral expression. He found his seat at the dinner table, making polite conversation with strangers while his mind churned. Naomi didn't return. Dinner was served, speeches were made, the first dance happened. Through it all, Naomi's chair beside him remained empty. Victoria appeared at his elbow during dessert. "Where's my sister?" "Library. She needed some space." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "What happened?" "Kieran happened, then I happened." Malcolm pushed away his untouched cake. "I might have pushed too hard." "Good," Victoria said, surprising him. "Someone needs to." Naomi spent her entire life being handled with kid gloves or criticized without mercy. Nobody's ever just been honest with her about the middle ground. The middle ground being that she's brilliant but human, that she can have both a career and a personal life if she stops seeing them as mutually exclusive. That being vulnerable isn't weakness. Victoria sat in Naomi's empty chair. "For what it's worth, I think you're good for her. You see past the armor." Kieran said some brutal things. Kieran was bitter and cruel, but he wasn't entirely wrong. My sister does hide behind work. She always has. Our father taught us that achievement equals worth, and Naomi internalized it more than I did. Victoria paused. "But I've watched her these past 2 weeks. She's different with you, lighter, more present. That's worth fighting for." "I'm not sure she agrees." "Then make her agree." Victoria stood. "Don't let her run. She's good at running. Someone needs to stand still and make her face what she's running from." Malcolm watched her go, her words settling into his consciousness. Stand still and make her face it. The reception continued. Dancing began. Malcolm declined several invitations, staying at the table and nursing a scotch someone had left. He checked his phone. Messages from Mrs. Chen, updates about Mia's day. His daughter was fine. His real life was fine. It was this life, this complicated, beautiful mess with Naomi Carter, that hung in the balance. Midnight approached when Naomi finally appeared. She'd fixed her makeup, changed into a simpler dress, and moved through the crowd with purpose. She stopped in front of Malcolm's table. "Dance with me," she said. Not a question, a demand. Malcolm stood, following her to the dance floor. The band was playing something slow and jazzy. Around them, couples swayed, lost in their own worlds. Naomi stepped into Malcolm's arms, and he pulled her close. They moved together in silence for a long moment. Then Naomi spoke, her lips close to his ear. "I've been thinking about what you said, about choosing, about trying." Her hands tightened on his shoulders. "You're right. I am scared. Terrified, actually. Because everyone I've ever let in has eventually left or died or decided I wasn't worth the effort." "Naomi, let me finish." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "But you're also right that fear isn't an excuse. If I want this, want you, I have to actually try. Not just fit you into the margins, not just keep you as a nice idea, really try." Malcolm's heart was pounding. "What does that mean, specifically?" "It means I'm going to start leaving work at 6 instead of 9. It means I'm going to delegate more and stop trying to control everything. It means I'm going to introduce you to Elijah and let you meet the part of my life I protect most fiercely." She paused. "It means I'm going to risk failing because trying is better than the alternative." The alternative being? Being exactly what Kieran said. Alone. Surrounded by achievements but empty inside. Tears gathered in her eyes. "I don't want that life anymore, Malcolm. I want the messy, complicated, terrifying one. The one with you in it." Malcolm cupped her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. "That's all I needed to hear, that you're willing to try." "I'm willing," Naomi said. I'm terrified, but I'm willing. They kissed there on the dance floor, surrounded by strangers and family and the wreckage of expectations. The music swelled around them, and for the first time in weeks, Malcolm felt like they might actually make it, not because it would be easy, not because they had it all figured out, but because Naomi had finally chosen to try. And sometimes that was enough to start with. The drive back to the city Sunday afternoon felt different than the journey out. Less rehearsed, more real. Naomi sat in the passenger seat of Malcolm's aging sedan, her shoes kicked off, her hair loose and windblown from the ocean breeze they'd walked through that morning. The family brunch had been surprisingly painless. Patricia had been almost warm, Richard genuinely interested in Malcolm's thoughts on sustainable architecture. Victoria had cornered Naomi in the bathroom and apparently told her to stop being an idiot and actually give this relationship a chance. Even Kieran's presence at the farewell gathering had been manageable. He'd kept his distance, offering only a curt nod before leaving with a leggy redhead who looked at him like he'd hung the moon. "Do you think he's happy?" Naomi asked suddenly, watching the landscape blur past. "Kieran, with whatever he found instead of me." Malcolm glanced at her. "Does it matter?" "I guess not. I just wonder if he was right. If I'm fundamentally broken in some way he could see, and I couldn't." "You're not broken," Malcolm said firmly. "You're just someone who learned that love had conditions, that you had to earn it through achievement. That's different than being broken. That's being hurt." Naomi was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I want to tell you something about why I'm so scared of this. Okay? When I was 12, my father took me to work on a Saturday. Just me, not Victoria. I thought it was special that he'd chosen me. We spent the whole day together. He showed me blueprints, explained how buildings worked, let me sit in on a client meeting. And at the end of the day, he told me I had real talent, that I could be great at this." Malcolm heard the pain beneath the memory. But then he said greatness required sacrifice, that I couldn't have everything, not if I wanted to be the best. He told me about all the things he'd given up, family dinners, vacations, being present for me and Victoria growing up. And he said it was worth it because look at what he'd built. Her voice cracked slightly. "I was 12, and I learned that love was something you sacrificed to be worthy, that being present was less important than being successful." "That's a terrible thing to teach a child," Malcolm said. "I know that now. But I spent 20 years proving him right, working 80-hour weeks, choosing projects over people, telling myself it was worth it because I was building something that mattered." She turned to look at him. "And then you showed up and asked me what I actually wanted. Not what I should want, what I wanted. And I realized I had no idea." Malcolm reached across the console, taking her hand. "So figure it out. You have time." "What if what I want is incompatible with what I've built?" "Then you rebuild," Malcolm said. "Naomi, you're an architect. You know that sometimes the foundation is sound, but the structure needs to change. That's not failure. That's adaptation." She squeezed his hand, and they drove in comfortable silence for a while. Malcolm's phone buzzed with a text from Mia, a picture of cookies she and Mrs. Chen had made, her face covered in chocolate. His heart squeezed with missing her. "Tell me about Mia," Naomi said. "Not the sanitized version for my family, the real version." Malcolm smiled. "She's smart. Too smart sometimes. She sees through every lie I tell, every time I try to protect her from hard truths. After Sarah died, I tried to hide how much I was struggling. Mia was 2 months old and I was drowning, but I thought I had to be strong. She's the one who called Mrs. Chen when I broke down. A 2-month-old baby, and somehow she knew I needed help. She called a neighbor? She cried in a specific way. Mrs. Chen heard through the walls and came to check, found me sitting on the floor with Mia in my arms, both of us crying. He laughed without humor. "Not my finest moment as a parent." "It sounds like a very human moment," Naomi said gently. "Yeah, that's what Mrs. Chen said. She moved in for 2 weeks, taught me how to function again, showed me that asking for help wasn't weakness." He glanced at Naomi. "Which is advice I probably should have remembered before watching you fall apart in your office." "I'm glad you didn't remember. If you'd left that night, none of this would have happened." "Would that have been better?" "No," Naomi said without hesitation. "Harder, maybe. Safer, definitely, but not better. They stopped for gas an hour outside the city. While Malcolm filled the tank, Naomi went inside for coffee. When she came back, she was holding 2 cups and wearing an expression of determination. "I called my assistant," she said. "Told her to clear my schedule Tuesday afternoon, block out 3 hours." "For what?" "For you to meet Elijah, if you're still willing." Malcolm's heart jumped. "I'm willing." "Are you sure you're ready?" "No, but you were right. I can't keep holding you at arm's length. Either this is real or it isn't. If it's real, you need to meet the most important person in my life." She handed him a coffee. "Fair warning, he's 6, obsessed with herbivorous dinosaurs, and has no filter. He will ask you uncomfortable questions." "I raised a daughter who asked her preschool teacher why grown-ups have hair in weird places," Malcolm said. "I can handle uncomfortable questions." Naomi laughed, the tension breaking. "Okay then, Tuesday. My place, 2 o'clock. Don't be late." "I'll be there," Malcolm promised. They arrived back in the city as sunset painted the buildings gold and orange. Malcolm drove Naomi to her penthouse first, helping her carry her luggage to the lobby. The doorman greeted her by name, eyeing Malcolm with polite curiosity. "So," Malcolm said as they stood in the gleaming marble lobby that probably cost more than his entire apartment building. "What happens now?" "Now we do this for real," Naomi said. "No more pretending, no more performance. Just 2 people figuring out if they can actually make this work." "And if we can't?" "Then at least we tried." She stepped closer, her hands finding his. "Malcolm, I meant what I said at the wedding. I'm going to try, really try. That means delegating more at work, leaving earlier, making time for us. I can't promise I'll be perfect at it." "I don't want perfect," Malcolm said. "I just want honest effort." "That I can give you." She kissed him, soft and sweet. "Thank you. For pushing me. For not letting me hide." "Anytime." He pulled back reluctantly. "I should go. Mia's probably driving Mrs. Chen crazy by now. Tell her I said hello." "I will, when she actually knows who you are." Naomi smiled. Soon, Malcolm drove home through familiar streets that somehow looked different. The city he'd lived in for 5 years, navigated on autopilot while grief hollowed him out, suddenly felt full of possibility again. Not because everything was solved or simple, but because he'd remembered what it felt like to want something beyond just getting through the day. Mrs. Chen met him at the door with Mia in tow. His daughter launched herself at him with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been gone years instead of days. "Daddy, you're back! Did you have fun at your work thing?" Malcolm caught her, swinging her up despite the fact that she was getting too big for it. "I did." "Were you good for Mrs. Chen?" "She was perfect," Mrs. Chen said, though she did eat approximately her body weight in cookies. "Only because you kept making them," Mia protested. Malcolm laughed, feeling the tension of the weekend finally drain away. This was real. This was home. Whatever happened with Naomi, whatever complicated dance they were beginning, this was his foundation. Later, after Mia was asleep and Malcolm was alone in his apartment, he found himself pulling out his sketches. The community park project, the residential designs, all the work he'd been doing for years in the margins of his life, never quite believing it could be more than a hobby. His phone buzzed. An email from Catherine Brennan at the Architectural Digest Foundation with details about the presentation date. 3 weeks away. A chance to present his work to people who might actually see its value. Naomi had given him that. By believing in his work enough to submit it. By seeing potential he'd stopped seeing in himself. He texted her. "Thank you for the grant nomination, for everything." Her response came quickly. "You would have gotten there on your own eventually. I just sped up the timeline." Still, "Thank you. You're welcome. Now go to sleep. Tuesday's going to be terrifying for both of us." Malcolm smiled and did as instructed. Tuesday arrived with unseasonable rain. Malcolm left work at 1:30, telling his supervisor he had a personal appointment. The curious looks from his colleagues didn't bother him. Soon enough, everyone would know he was dating the CEO. But first he had to meet a 6-year-old who would probably decide if this relationship had any chance at all. Naomi's penthouse was in a glass tower downtown, all clean lines and expensive views. Malcolm took the elevator to the 23rd floor, his heart pounding. When Naomi opened the door, she looked as nervous as he felt. "He knows you're coming," she said immediately. "I told him you're someone important to me, someone I care about." "And what did he say?" "He asked if you like dinosaurs." Naomi smiled shakily. "I told him I didn't know, but you'd be happy to discuss them." "I can work with that." The penthouse was beautiful but cold. All designer furniture and carefully curated art, the kind of space that looked like a magazine spread, except for one corner of the living room, where a pile of toys and books created a chaotic island of childhood in the adult perfection. A small boy emerged from what Malcolm assumed was a bedroom. He had Naomi's dark eyes and coloring, but a sweetness to his expression that was all his own. He stopped when he saw Malcolm, studying him with the serious intensity of childhood. "Hi," Elijah said. "You're Malcolm." "I am. You must be Elijah." "Do you like stegosauruses?" Malcolm crouched down to Elijah's level. "I don't know much about them, but I'd like to learn." Elijah's face lit up. "They have plates on their backs. Scientists used to think the plates were for protection, but now they think maybe they were for temperature regulation. Isn't that cool?" "That's very cool," Malcolm agreed. "Do you want to see my dinosaur collection?" Malcolm glanced at Naomi, who was watching them with barely contained emotion. She nodded. "I'd love to," Malcolm said. He spent the next hour sitting on Elijah's bedroom floor while the boy showed him dinosaur after dinosaur, explaining their characteristics with the expertise of a passionate 6-year-old. Malcolm asked questions, made appropriate impressed sounds, and learned more about herbivorous dinosaurs than he'd ever imagined knowing. Naomi watched from the doorway, her expression soft in a way Malcolm had never seen. This was her with her guard down. This was the person beneath the CEO armor. Eventually, Elijah got hungry, and they migrated to the kitchen. Naomi made grilled cheese sandwiches with the careful attention of someone who didn't cook often, but was trying. They ate at the counter, Elijah chattering about school and his friends, and whether pterodactyls were actually dinosaurs or just related to them. "Mom says you're her friend," Elijah said suddenly, looking at Malcolm with those two knowing eyes. "But you look at her like grown-ups look at each other when they're more than friends." Naomi choked on her water. Malcolm kept his expression neutral. "You're very observant," Malcolm said. "I know. Mom says I notice too much." Elijah swung his legs, not quite reaching the floor from the high stool. "Are you going to be around a lot?" The question was simple, but weighted with implications. This was a child who'd learned that people left. His father had left before he was born. Naomi's various attempts at dating had probably introduced temporary figures who'd disappeared. Elijah was protecting himself. "I'd like to be," Malcolm said honestly, "if that's okay with you." "Will you leave if Mom works too much? That's what happened with the other ones." Naomi's face went pale. "Elijah." "It's okay," Malcolm said gently. He turned back to Elijah. "Here's the truth. Your mom does work a lot, and sometimes that will be hard. But I work too, and I have a daughter who needs me. So we both have complicated lives. The question isn't whether we'll have problems, it's whether we'll work through them together." "Do you promise?" Elijah asked. "I can't promise we'll be perfect," Malcolm said, "but I can promise I'll try. And I'll be honest with you. If something's not working, I'll tell you." Elijah considered this. Then he turned to Naomi. "Mom, do you promise to try too?" Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, baby, I promise." "Okay then." Elijah returned his attention to his sandwich. "Malcolm, do you have any kids?" "I have a daughter. Her name is Mia. She's 8. "Does she like dinosaurs?" "I don't know, but maybe you could ask her sometime." Elijah's face lit up at the possibility of a new audience for his dinosaur knowledge. Later, after Elijah had returned to his room to build a Lego dinosaur habitat, Malcolm and Naomi stood in the kitchen together. She was washing dishes with shaking hands. "He liked you," she said quietly. "He doesn't like most people. He's a great kid, smart as hell." "He asked about you leaving, about the other ones." Naomi's voice broke. "I didn't realize he'd noticed how much my failed attempts at dating affected him." Malcolm took the dish from her hands, setting it aside, and pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against him, not crying but trembling with the weight of realization. "You're trying now," he said into her hair. That's what matters, not what you did before. What you're doing now. I don't want to mess him up, Naomi whispered. Or Mia. What if we try this and it doesn't work and we hurt them? Then we handle it with honesty and care. Kids are resilient if you're honest with them. Malcolm pulled back to look at her. But Naomi, we can't not try because we're scared of failing. That's not protecting them. That's protecting ourselves. She nodded against his chest. When can I meet Mia? For real. Whenever you're ready. This weekend? We could do something kid-friendly. Give them a chance to meet without pressure. The aquarium? Malcolm suggested. Mia loves the jellyfish exhibit, and I bet Elijah would love the marine reptiles section. Perfect. Naomi smiled, but it was tinged with anxiety. What if they hate each other? Then we figure it out, but I have a feeling they'll be fine. They're both smart, kind kids being raised by parents doing their best. That's a good foundation. The following Saturday, Malcolm picked up Naomi and Elijah in his aging sedan. Elijah was fascinated by the duct-taped mirror, asking detailed questions about automotive repair that Malcolm couldn't answer. Naomi looked beautiful and terrified in jeans and a sweater, more casual than Malcolm had ever seen her. They picked up Mia next. His daughter came bounding out of the apartment with Mrs. Chen waving from the doorway. She climbed into the back seat and immediately noticed Elijah. Hi, I'm Mia. Are you Elijah? Yeah, do you like sea turtles? I love sea turtles. Did you know they can hold their breath for like 7 hours? That's because their metabolism slows down underwater. It's a survival adaptation. And just like that, the kids were bonding over marine biology facts, while Malcolm and Naomi exchanged relieved glances in the front seat. The aquarium was crowded, but manageable. Malcolm bought tickets. Naomi tried to pay, but he insisted, some lingering pride about providing, and they entered the cool darkness filled with glowing tanks and excited children. Mia and Elijah raced ahead to the jellyfish exhibit, their initial shyness evaporating in mutual enthusiasm. Malcolm and Naomi followed more slowly, hands linked. They like each other, Naomi said, relief evident in her voice. Seems like it. Mia's wonderful. She has your eyes. She has her mother's everything else, Malcolm said. The stubbornness, the intelligence, the way she sees through every excuse. They watched their children press their faces against the glass, pointing at moon jellies and sea nettles, talking over each other in the way of kids who've found a kindred spirit. This could work, Naomi said quietly. Couldn't it? All of us together? Yeah, Malcolm said. I think it could. They spent 3 hours exploring tanks and touch pools and educational exhibits. At lunch in the aquarium cafe, Mia and Elijah debated whether sharks or dolphins were cooler, while Malcolm and Naomi traded stories about parenting failures and small victories. I forgot to pack Elijah's lunch last week, Naomi admitted. 3 days in a row. Had to have my assistant order delivery to the school. I sent Mia to school with 2 left shoes last month, Malcolm countered. Didn't notice until the teacher called. I missed Elijah's school play because of a contract negotiation. I fell asleep during Mia's piano recital. They were one-upping each other with parenting disasters, and somehow it felt like the most intimate conversation they'd had. No pretense, no performance, just 2 imperfect people doing their best. On the drive home, both kids fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the day. Malcolm drove carefully, precious cargo making him extra cautious. Thank you, Naomi said softly. For today. For making this easy. It was easy because they're good kids. No, it was easy because you're good at this, at making people feel comfortable, at seeing what they need and providing it. She looked at him. I'm going to mess this up sometimes. Work will get crazy, and I'll forget to text and I'll cancel plans. I know. And you'll still want to try? Naomi, I'm a widowed single father who lives in a tiny apartment and drives a car held together by prayer and duct tape. I'm not looking for perfect. I'm looking for real. And this you, me, our kids, this messy, complicated thing we're building, this is real. Tears gathered in her eyes. I love you. I know it's too soon to say that. We've only really been together for a few weeks. But I do. I love you. Malcolm's heart stuttered. It's not too soon. And I love you too. They said it quietly, conscious of the sleeping children in the back seat, but the weight of the words filled the car. This wasn't the desperate declaration of early infatuation. This was the steady recognition of something worth building on. The following Monday, Naomi called an HR meeting. She and Malcolm sat across from the Director of Human Resources, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, who listened with professional neutrality as Naomi explained the situation. "We began seeing each other outside of work," Naomi said. "Malcolm is technically an employee, but we work on different floors and have no direct professional interaction. We're here to disclose the relationship and ensure we're complying with company policy." Patricia reviewed the employee handbook, asked several clarifying questions, and finally nodded. Given that there's no direct reporting relationship or project overlap, this falls within acceptable parameters. However, I'll need both of you to sign conflict of interest disclosure forms. And Mr. Reed, if you're ever assigned to a project Mrs. Carter is directly overseeing, one of you will need to recuse themselves. "Understood," Malcolm said. "Also," Patricia added with the ghost of a smile, "congratulations. It's nice to see Miss Carter happy." Word spread through the office with the speed of wildfire. By Tuesday afternoon, everyone knew. Malcolm's colleagues approached with curiosity and barely concealed envy. The fourth floor suddenly treated him differently, not badly, but with a new wariness, like he'd crossed into a different category of employee. Only one person was outright hostile. James, a senior draftsman who'd been at the firm for 15 years, cornered Malcolm in the break room. "Must be nice," James said, his voice carrying an edge. "Dating the boss. Good way to get ahead without actually earning it." Malcolm set down his coffee, meeting James's eyes steadily. "You have something to say it directly." "I'm just calling it like I see it. You've been here 3 years, kept your head down, never made waves. Suddenly you're dating Naomi Carter and getting nominated for prestigious grants? That's not coincidence." "The grant nomination came before we were together," Malcolm said calmly, "and it was based on my work, not my relationship status." "Sure it was." James's smile was ugly. "Just know that some of us see what's happening, and we're not impressed." Malcolm felt anger rise but tamped it down. Getting into a fight would only reinforce whatever narrative James was constructing. "I'm sorry you feel that way," he said evenly, "but my personal life isn't your concern. If you have issues with my work, take them up with my supervisor." He left before James could respond, his hands shaking with suppressed frustration. That evening, he told Naomi about the encounter. They were at his apartment. She'd started spending more evenings there, preferring the comfortable mess to her sterile penthouse. Mia was doing homework at the kitchen table while they talked quietly in the living room. "I can talk to him," Naomi said immediately. "Make it clear that kind of attitude isn't acceptable." "No," Malcolm said. "That'll only make it worse. Make it look like I'm running to you for protection. So what do you want to do?" "Prove him wrong. Let my work speak for itself." Malcolm leaned back against the couch. "The grant presentation is next week. If I do well, if the foundation actually awards it, that'll show everyone my work stands on its own merit. And if they don't, then I keep doing what I've been doing. Good work. Honest effort. Eventually, people will judge me on that instead of who I'm dating." Naomi curled against his side, fitting perfectly under his arm. "I hate that you have to deal with this because of me." "It's not because of you. It's because some people can't handle change or success they didn't predict." He kissed the top of her head. "I can handle office politics, Naomi. What I couldn't handle is losing you because we were too scared to try." The grant presentation took place on a Thursday afternoon in a conference room that made Malcolm's palms sweat. 5 committee members sat in judgment while he presented his community park redesign, his residential concepts, his vision for architecture that served people rather than just aesthetics. He talked about accessibility features that didn't compromise design, about using sustainable materials without sacrificing durability, about creating public spaces that welcomed everyone, not just those who could afford premium experiences. The questions were tough but fair. He answered honestly, admitting when he didn't know something, defending his choices when challenged. By the time he finished, he was exhausted but satisfied. He'd done his best. That was all he could control. The decision would come in a week. That evening, Naomi took him to dinner to celebrate just getting through it. They went to the Thai place near Malcolm's apartment, the one from their fictional dating story that had become real. Over pad thai and spring rolls, they talked about everything and nothing. Elijah asked if you were going to be his dad, Naomi said suddenly. Malcolm's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. What did you tell him? That you're someone very important to me, that we're building something together, that it's too early to know exactly what that looks like. She paused. Was that the right answer? It was honest. That's always the right answer with kids. He likes you more than he liked any of the others, Naomi said. He asked when you're coming over again. When Mia can come too. What about this weekend? My place. I'll cook, or attempt to. The kids can play. We can just be normal for a few hours. Normal sounds perfect. Saturday brought chaos in the best way. Mia and Elijah transformed Malcolm's small living room into a dinosaur habitat using every pillow, blanket, and piece of furniture they could commandeer. Naomi helped Malcolm in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with careful precision while he attempted to make spaghetti without burning anything. This is nice, she said, watching the kids through the open doorway. Domestic. I never thought I'd want this. And now? Now I can't imagine going back to that empty penthouse with its perfect furniture and complete silence. She looked at him. I've been thinking about selling it, getting something more family-friendly. Maybe in a neighborhood with actual parks and grocery stores you can walk to. Malcolm's heart jumped. That's a big change. So is this. Us. Everything. She set down the knife. Malcolm, I know we haven't been together long. I know it's fast. But I'm 30 years old and I'm tired of waiting for the perfect moment. This feels right. You feel right. Our kids together feel right. So why not actually commit to it? What are you saying? I'm saying maybe in 6 months or a year, we talk about actually combining households. Not rushing, but working toward it. Building something intentional instead of just seeing what happens. She looked nervous, vulnerable. Is that crazy? Malcolm pulled her into his arms, breathing in the citrus scent of her hair. It's not crazy. It's terrifying and wonderful and exactly what I want. She pulled back, smiling. Yeah? Yeah. They kissed there in his cramped kitchen while pasta water boiled over and their children built dinosaur worlds in the next room. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale. But it was real, and that made it better than any performance. The grant decision came via email on a Tuesday morning. Malcolm was at his desk reviewing calculations when his phone buzzed. He opened the message with shaking hands. Dear Mr. Reed, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a recipient of the Architectural Digest Foundation's Emerging Designer Grant. He read it 3 times to make sure it was real. $15,000. Publication in the winter issue. Recognition from people who mattered in his field. He'd done it, on his own merit. Malcolm immediately texted Naomi. I got it. Her response was instantaneous. I knew you would. Congratulations. I'm so proud of you. Thank you. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. That's what love is. Seeing potential even when the other person can't. Malcolm stared at that message, his chest tight with emotion. 6 weeks ago, he'd been a widower going through motions, convinced his life was defined by loss. Now he had a future, a partner, a family being built from broken pieces. That evening, they celebrated with both kids at a pizza place Elijah loved. Mia presented Malcolm with a card she'd made at school, construction paper and glitter, declaring, "Congratulations, Daddy." Elijah showed him a drawing of a stegosaurus he'd named Malcolm the Brave. Naomi watched them with tears in her eyes, and Malcolm understood. This was what she'd been missing. Not romance or grand gestures, but small moments of connection. Family. Belonging. Speech, Mia demanded, standing on her chair despite Malcolm's attempts to get her to sit. Speech, yeah, Elijah echoed, not entirely sure what that meant, but excited anyway. Malcolm stood, clearing his throat dramatically. Thank you all for being here. This grant is amazing, but it's not the best thing that's happened to me recently. What's better than money? Elijah asked, genuinely curious. You, Malcolm said, pointing at him. And you. He pointed at Mia. And especially you. He smiled at Naomi. Finding people who make life better just by being in it, that's worth more than any grant, That's corny, Daddy, Mia said, but she was smiling. Yeah, Malcolm agreed, but it's true. 3 months later, Malcolm stood in Naomi's, their, new apartment. Not the sterile penthouse, but a real home in a neighborhood with trees and parks and schools within walking distance. 3 bedrooms because the kids each needed their own space. An office that Naomi and Malcolm would share, their desks facing each other so they could work in companionable silence. It wasn't perfect. Naomi still worked too much sometimes. Malcolm still struggled with anxiety about being enough. The kids bickered over dinosaur facts and bathroom time. They argued about whose turn it was to cook, to do laundry, to handle the million small details of combined households. But every night, they chose each other. Every morning, they woke up together and faced whatever came. That was the promise they'd made, not perfection, but persistent effort. Not a fairy tale, but a real life built with intention and love. On a Friday evening, Malcolm found Naomi on their new balcony, staring at the city lights. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned into him. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That night you found me crying in my office. How desperate I was, how certain I was that I'd messed up everything beyond repair. And now? Now I'm standing here with you, in a home we chose together, with 2 kids who are probably destroying something in the living room, and I've never been happier." She turned in his arms. "You saved me, Malcolm, not from my family or my ex or my career, from myself, from the belief that I had to be perfect to be worthy of love." "You saved me too," Malcolm said, "from thinking my life was over when Sarah died, from settling for just getting through instead of actually living." Inside, a crash sounded, followed by Mia's, "It wasn't me," and Elijah's laughter. "We should probably check on that," Naomi said. "Probably," Malcolm agreed. But they stayed there a moment longer, holding each other while the city hummed below and their imperfect, beautiful life waited inside. This was what they'd built from a whispered plea for help. Not a perfect love story, but a real one. Not people without problems, but people willing to face them together. And in the end, that was everything. Malcolm kissed her there on the balcony, tasting salt air and possibility. When they finally went inside to deal with whatever catastrophe the kids had created, they went together. Partners in the truest sense. Not because it was easy, not because they'd figured everything out, but because they'd chosen each other every single day and would keep choosing each other for all the days to come. That night, after the kids were in bed and the apartment was finally quiet, Malcolm and Naomi curled up on their couch. His fingers traced patterns on her shoulder while she rested her head against his chest. "I love you," Naomi said quietly, "in case I don't say it enough." "You say it plenty," Malcolm said, "but I'll never get tired of hearing it." "Good, because I plan to keep saying it every day for the rest of our lives." Malcolm's heart swelled. They hadn't talked about marriage yet, hadn't made that specific commitment. But this was a proposal of sorts. A promise of daily choice, persistent love, building something that lasted. "The rest of our lives sounds perfect," he said, and there, in their imperfect home with their complicated families and their real messy love, Malcolm Reed and Naomi Carter began the next chapter. Not perfectly, not without challenges, but together, choosing each other every single day. It was more than enough. It was everything.